inserting sections to collect information. For instance, we have TCS on sale of purchase of goods 1%. We have TDS on purchase of goods 1%. Interested in tax. They're interested in the information. So this is how they'll collect information. They'll verify with the details which you file in the return of income, and then they'll throw you notice. Here difference are I explain karo. So this is what is going to happen. No problem. Too much of technology results in this. Thank you so much. And I also believe in next 5 years, I think they will tell you that this is your return of income. You just sign and file it, which they are planning. Many notices have been issued under section 148 of the 148A of the Income Tax Act. It's a new section which has been introduced by the Finance Act 2021 to reopen the assessments. So therefore, it becomes imperative that what is the procedure, to know what is the procedure, how to reply to notice, what will happen subsequently, whether we can challenge the notice, whether we can challenge the order passed for issuing a notice under section 148A clause T. This becomes very critical to understand at this stage, because time limit to issue notice, if one has read the new provisions, then there are two time limits. One is within 3 years and 3 to 10 years. Up to 3 years, they can reopen only if they have an information suggesting income escaping assessment. And 3 to 10 years, they can reopen subject to certain more conditions. Their focus is up to 3 years. They want to reopen as many cases as possible up to 3 years, because there the conditions are quite limited. If it is beyond 3 years, then the scope of challenge by the SSC increases. There are many arguments which becomes available to an SSC, and therefore they are trying to restrict it and close it up to 3 years. So you must have received notices for assessment year 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21. Okay, so therefore it becomes important. So today's presentation, I will also refresh some of the aspects of old reassessment procedures for two reasons. One, the litigation under old reassessment procedure is still going on. In fact, the notices issued prior to 31st March 2021 are under the old regime, and that will come up for challenge before CITF or tribunal in near future. If I'll just touch upon few of the aspects, everybody is aware about the old reassessment procedures. More importantly, why we need to go to the old reassessment procedures to understand what is the difference between old and new procedure. Because once we look at both the provisions, we come to know what are the changes prescribed in the new regime as compared to the old regime, and therefore it also becomes important to understand the old regime. With this, let me start with the background concept of self-assessment. This might change in future. Under the Income Tax Act, the government is trusting an assessee that you will compute your income yourself under the relevant provisions of the Act. You will estimate your total income. You will pay your advance tax. You will file your return of income, and you will pay your self-assessment tax. At the stage of filing of return of income, there is no interference by the government till date. This may change in future. If you contrast this with octroi tax, there they will verify and they will determine this is your tax liability, you please pay this. This is the difference. Self-assessment means you have to assess yourself. This is the practice under the Income Tax Act. Very few returns are selected for scrutiny, less than 1% I am told. There is a summary assessment under 143(1) where they can make prima facie adjustments. But year on year, they are increasing the scope of adjustment under 143(1). And you will be surprised that you're receiving notices for disallowing claim under section 80P2D in case of cooperating housing societies. There are 10A, 10B deductions, 10AA deductions are getting disallowed. 115BAA, this is a major point right now. Since you have not filed your form 10 IC within the due date of filing of return of income, therefore 115BAA claim has been rejected. You are taxed at 30%, and in some cases even MAT has been charged, and a huge demand has been created. So this everything is happening in 143(1), which according to me it's beyond the scope of 143. It's a prima facie adjustment. And your submission which you are filing in response to 143(1) is not even looked after by an officer. It is looked after by computer. So therefore, this kind of adjustments, in my humble view, cannot be made under 143. If you want, you reopen, we will explain to your assessing officer. In any case, that has also become faceless. वो भी हमको पता नहीं वो कौन सुन रहा है. ऑफिसर सुन रहा है, उसका स्टाफ सुन रहा है, कोई भी नहीं सुन रहा है. There is going to be a Gujarat High Court judgment. The proceedings were live before on the YouTube, and senior advocate Saurabh Soparkar was arguing. He's saying that I made some submissions through video conferencing, and those submissions are not considered in the assessment order pass, and a huge demand is created. Department produced the copy of video recording, and if you hear the copy of video recording, for flat 25 minutes, the assessee is arguing. There is no response whatsoever from the other side. He is asking, are you able to hear me? You have any questions? You want to say anything? You want to ask anything? There is no reply. For 5 minutes, video went off, audio went off. There was some technical defect. But the officer is not pointing out that video has gone off. So assessee is not even aware that audio has gone off. He is not able to hear me. And that person is not even pointing out. Because I am not able to hear you, you please restart whatever you are arguing. And then abruptly the video ends. He stopped the hearing. So the Gujarat High Court has come down so heavily upon the department that if this is the manner in which you're going to conduct video recording, better don't do. Why waste time? And the department's advocate was asked, we'll do this with you once. We'll hear you on video conferencing. We'll shut our video. We'll not ask or will not respond to any of your issues. You just keep on blabbering. Then you will realize what is happening to the assessors. So this is what is happening in faceless assessments. Of course, this might be 2 out of 10 cases or 3 out of 10 cases, but it brings bad name, bad repute for reasons best known to them. So there's a summary assessment, there's a scrutiny assessment under 143.3 and 144. And in case of search, if the search has happened prior to 1st of April 21, then the assessments are to be completed under section 153A. Searches happening after 1421 are now governed by the reassessment provisions. There is no separate provision for assessment in pursuance of search. It's now governed by the same 148 section. Then you have the concept of revision of assessment under section 263 if the order is erroneous and prejudicial to the interest of revenue. Again, this section has been utilized. Very recently, I've come across a case. Assessment is for limited scrutiny to verify A aspect of your income. Commissioner feels that B aspect may you are not inquired, but he is not required to inquire. It's a limited scrutiny. You have issued instructions that in a case of a limited scrutiny, the officer will not make fishing roving inquiry. If he makes fishing roving inquiry, we'll initiate action against the officer. So by adhering to that circular, assessing officer does not make any inquiry. Now you want to revise saying that tumne ye kyun nahi dekha? Since you have not converted limited scrutiny into full scrutiny, the order is erroneous and prejudicial to the interest of the revenue. So this is what we are again facing. Of course, we have many tribunal judgments to the effect if it's for limited scrutiny, you cannot revise for an issue which is not covered by the limited scrutiny. You want to do, you do a reassessment under 147, but certainly you cannot revise under section 263. Section 264 can be used by the assessees to claim some benefits which he has missed while filing his return of income or during the completion of assessment. This is a very beneficial section. Everybody is aware in the budget they have proposed a voluntary disclosure scheme kind of thing. That can be used only if you want to offer something more, not if you want to claim some benefit. So then what is the remedy? See, you have to file letter of income, say for example, an individual up to 31st July. A tax audit company 30th September. And transfer pricing 30th November. I hope I'm right. These are the dates? Yeah. Okay. The due date to file revised return is 31st December. So take a case of a tax audit company or take a case of a transfer pricing company left with 1 and 3 months time to file revised return. Section 139(5), which deals with the revised return, wordings are if you discover any omission or error, then you can file. If you discover, abhi ek mahine mein main kaise discover karunga? So there is no scope of filing revised return. As such, section 139(5) has become redundant. Why they have reduced the time limit is because they say we have now become electronic, and in this era, our assessments are getting completed very fast. If you see the time limit to complete the assessment, it is 9 months from the end of the assessment year. So assessment year 21-22, assessment has to be completed by 31st December 22. 9 महीने में खत्म करना है. And the earlier revised return time limit was 1 year from the end of the assessment year. Therefore, they have reduced the time limits. But what if I come across a claim which I have not made in the return of income? It is that but section 264 comes into the picture. Against your 143(1) intimation or against your assessment order, you can file an application under section 264 to the commissioner. Did I miss this? Please allow me. If it's he has to go into the merits. 99% he will not go into the merits. He will say, "नहीं, तुमने जो file किया ना, वही हमने accept किया." Therefore, there is no error. But his job is to see if the order is passed in accordance with law. You have collected rightful tax. See the taxpayers charter which was unveiled in the midst of lockdown, I think by Honorable Prime Minister. It says that you can only collect right amount of tax. Article 265 of the Constitution. No tax shall be levied except with the authority of law. So if I have paid some extra tax, it's a circular of 1955. The assessing officer has to help the assessee to claim right deductions or right benefits. All these three things are kept together. Then under 264, the commissioner has to certainly entertain your claim on merits and he has to provide you benefits. Now, here again there is one trick which one can use. 264 application has to be filed within 1 year from the end of the year, within 1 year from the date of the order which you want to revise, which is a 143(1) order. Sometimes 3 साल के बाद हमको समझता है कि हमारा ये रह गया. In that case, you can file a 154 first with the AO. He'll certainly reject it. Against that 154, you can go into 264. So you are taking care of the limitation period given under section 264 of the Act. I have seen 264 of the Act not being utilized in a manner in which it should be utilized. And 264 is a physical assessment, not a faceless thing. So it will go before your jurisdictional commissioner at this stage. In future, we don't know. Rectification of assessment under section 154, everybody is aware. Only a prima facie error can be rectified, not something which involves a debatable issue. And the Supreme Court has time and again held that there should be some finality to the process. You cannot keep on stretching the issues beyond a particular limit, which is now happening because they can reopen your assessment up to 10 years. Frankly, if you remember the speech of our Honorable Finance Minister while delivering budget of 2021, she very tactfully said, no, we are reducing the time limit from 6 years to 3 years. But actually, they have increased from 6 years to 10 years. Because the threshold is 50 lakh. 50 lakh is a peanuts in this age. But share application money भी 1 crore रुपए आता कभी-कभी. Unsecured loan is 1 crore. Penny stock is 1 crore. It's a peanut. 50 lakh is not a good threshold in this age. So frankly, they have increased the time limit to reassess from 6 to 10 years. In fact, I'll deal with the provisions and you will appreciate that. Frankly, 148 up to 3 years is actually a normal scrutiny assessment. 148 up to 3 years, the conditions are so limited, it is actually a normal scrutiny assessment. Which we will see when we go through the relevant provisions. First, we'll start with the old provisions. We'll very quickly revise the old provisions. Section 147 is the main section, income escaping assessment. 148, the issue of notice requiring the assessee to file return of income. 149 deals with time limit for issue of notice. 150 deals with a case where an assessment is getting reopened in consequence to an order of the tribunal or a commissioner appeals or in any other case. 151 deals with sanction and 153 deals with time limit for completion of assessment. All the sections have imposed some conditions. All these conditions are actually a check, a jurisdictional requirement. If any one of the condition is not complied with, a reassessment proceeding goes. For example, notice not issued properly, 148. There is no income escaping assessment. There is no reason to believe income has escaped assessment. Change of opinion. There is no failure to disclose. There is no proper approval in place. In all these cases, the courts have simply quashed it. There is no question of any set aside. If you are not complied with the jurisdictional requirements of section 147 to 151, your reassessment proceeding goes. And in most of the cases, when we argue before the courts, high courts or tribunals or CIT appeal, our first proposition is reassessment is bad in law. Because we are most certain that merits पे कुछ केस नहीं बनता है, या तो unsecured loan है, या तो bogus purchase है, या तो फिर penny stock है. Therefore, we are left with no option but to challenge on technical grounds. At what stage income can be reassessed? At all stages, income can be reassessed except one, when your assessment proceeding is going on. If it is going on, he cannot issue a fresh notice. Apart from that, they can reopen at any point of time. This is section 147, which is very important. Please compare the old section 147 with the new section 147. For that purpose, section 147 has been reproduced. If the assessing officer has reason to believe that any income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, he may assess or reassess such income and also any other income which comes to his notice subsequently. The crucial words are, the crucial phrases are threefold. If the AO, assessing officer, no other officer but your assessing officer, has reason to believe, this word reason to believe is now not present in the new section. So all the controversy attached to the word reason to believe goes with the section. What reason to believe? Income chargeable to tax must have escaped assessment. No other officer other than your AO can form reason to believe. If he is receiving information from any outside source, inside portal, investigation wing, from some other assessing officer, audit unit, simply based on information, he cannot reopen. He has to get the information. He has to verify the information from the facts of the case. He has to conduct his inquiry. He has to form his own reason to believe. It cannot be on the basis of a borrowed satisfaction. Generally, क्या होता है? Information from investigation wing. If they receive an information that so and so party we have raided, he is admitted he is in accommodation entry, and you are a beneficiary. You have received accommodation to the tune of rupees so and so. क्या accommodation entry नहीं लिखा है? कब मिला नहीं लिखा है? Where is my name surfacing नहीं लिखा है? Just on the basis of information from the investigation wing, your assessment has been reopened. And of late, I have seen cases where suppose a party was conducting Hawala racket and was issuing penny stock entries for 15 scripts. So मेरे में reopen कर दिया saying you are a beneficiary of accommodation entry, but मैंने किस script में क्या किया है? Nothing. Whether there is a loss, there is a gain, nothing. They have just reopened it simply. So this shows there is non-application of mind. Simply on the basis of information received from the investigation wing, without making any further inquiry, any further verification, you have simply reopened the assessment on the basis of borrowed satisfaction. That cannot happen. There has to be an application of mind. Reason to believe has been explained in various court judgments. Frankly, we are not required to go because not a part of the new section, but for the sake of academic interest, I have put it here. Reason to believe cannot be reason to suspect. You cannot reopen to verify the transactions. You cannot reopen to make fishing roving inquiries. Reasons में लिखा रहेगा, there are certain deposits in your bank account which needs verification, or you have received unsecured loans which remains unverified. That does not mean that there is a reason to believe income has escaped assessment. That means you want to make inquiry. You want to verify the transactions. There is a difference between making verification to find out income has escaped assessment and having a belief that income has really escaped assessment. To give a short example, search in case of A party, he has agreed he is providing accommodation entry through so and so company. Unsecured loans have been received by the SSE. Since it is in the nature of accommodation entry, therefore, I has a reason to believe income has escaped assessment. First example. Second example, SSE has received unsecured loan of rupees so and so, therefore, I have a reason to believe income has escaped assessment. Now I compare first and second. First, they have at least some material to say income has escaped assessment. There's some accommodation entry, there's some information available, somebody was searched. But second case, they say, you have received unsecured loans, therefore I have reason to believe income has escaped assessment. Unsecured loan is not an income. To find out whether unsecured loan can be taxed, and that too under section 68, you have to conduct an inquiry. Therefore, there is no reason to believe that income has escaped assessment. You cannot reopen to verify a issue. And we have lot many judgments in this regard.
And inquiry will be made on the basis of the information received from principal commissioner from the investigation. And let's say what they have stated is that one of the things was that transaction was they were searching out or they were investigation or something. That transaction total is 4 lakhs. But while making a inquiry or while drafting something type of revelation, it is below 40 lakhs. So all materials available with them, it is suggested it is 4 lakhs. But main word from the principal commissioner is 40 lakhs. So all the material proof they themselves it is 4 lakhs.
Complete
so
no.
We request that you should ask them to amend. हमारे स्कोप पे नहीं है, हमको आ गया, अभी आपको 40 लाख के पैसे चाहिए। आपके पास जो मटेरियल वो 4 लाख है, लेजर 4 लाख है, बिल 4 लाख है, सब 4 लाख देता है। Why you are assessing 40 lakhs? So आप नहीं कर सकते।
This shows non application of fine. The reassessment is on the basis of an incorrect information, which is not.
We have a mechanism as assessing officer, as assessing we can go to principal commissioner, or that is prerogative of assessing officer.
No, you cannot go to principal commissioner. Once he has received an information, then he had to apply his mind and then record reasons and then issue notice. He cannot reissue or issue notice at the behest of his superior authority. अगर करना है तो प्रिंसिपल कमिश्नर को बोलो 148 इशू करने को, तुम क्यों कर रहे हो? Power under 148 is with the assessing officer, not with the principal commissioner. So in this case, categorically, since the information is regarding 40 lakh rupees, whereas the transaction is of 4 lakh rupees, it itself shows is a non-application of money. And he has not verified the record. So on this count, you can succeed at the appellate levels. Tribunal, side table or tribunal levels. वो तो ऐड करेगा, वो नहीं छोड़ेगा. Again, reason to believe income has escaped assessment. The courts have held that firstly, the material which is in your possession must directly link to the fact that income has escaped assessment. So material in your possession is कि मैंने बैंक में deposit किया. Does that lead to a belief income has escaped assessment? The answer is no. There is a material in your possession that मैंने stock exchange पे इतना transactions किया, इतना turnover हुआ. Does that lead to a belief that income has escaped assessment? Answer is no. मेरा purchase तुमने देखा नहीं है. Only you look at my sale figure and you conclude that there is an income escaping assessment. The answer is no. If you take into consideration my purchases as well, you will come to know that actually तो मेरे को loss हुआ है. There should be a link or nexus or connection between material and the fact that income has escaped assessment. There should be some income which has escaped assessment in first place. A company received a gift from another company, say for example on 1/4/2016. Receipt of gift by a company is not taxable. It was made taxable under 56(2)(10) with effect from 1/4/2017. So he is saying you have received gift from so and so company without consideration chargeable to tax. So I'll just show under which provision. It's not chargeable to tax, a capital receipt. If it is not chargeable to tax, you cannot reopen. So in first place, there has to be income which has escaped assessment. Very recently, a Bombay High Court judgment is there in case of Nilesh Bharani. Many must be aware, cash loan का transactions हुआ है, काफी सब पकड़ा वहाँ पे. Receipt of a cash loan, does it lead to a belief that income has escaped assessment? If I am giving cash loan, yes, because मेरे पास cash पड़ा, which is undisclosed, which is my investment, giving of cash loan. But receipt of a cash loan, assuming not disclosed in the books of account, how does it lead to a belief income has escaped assessment? Ultimately, it's a loan. You yourself are saying it's a loan. Loan is not income. If you want to tax it under section 68, there has to be a credit entry in my books of account. All these transactions are outside the books of account. So 68 में भी तुम add नहीं कर सकते. Even otherwise you cannot add. Bombay High Court says where is the income escaping assessment? Ultimately, what you want to do is you want to levy penalty under section 269 SST violation. You cannot add it. There is no income. You want to levy penalty. High Court says you cannot reopen to levy penalty. So therefore, there should be firstly an income which has escaped assessment. Now this proposition that income has escaped assessment continues in the new section. Moving forward, if the very basis of reopening is incorrect, for example, they say you received share application money of 40 lakhs in this year. Sir's case, you have received 40 lakhs accommodation entry in this year, but the fact is you have not received, or you have received of a lesser amount. If the basis of reopening the assessment is incorrect, the whole basis, the foundation is incorrect. Instead of A entity, B entity has been reopened. Names are similar, तो एक ही जगह B entity का खोल दिया. I had argued a case before the High Court. A company name with the same name, there was a company in Calcutta. There they had some transactions and bank transactions हुआ था और they reopened my assessment. And I have never dealt with this company. They say there is some credit in your Indusin bank account. I said I don't have an account with Indusin bank. I gave him an MCA ka online report saying this company with exactly same name in Calcutta. This is a mistaken identity. You cannot come to tax me because there is no transaction. High Court has quashed the reassessment notices. So these are factual inaccuracies. तुम्हारा तो base है, foundation to reopen is in. Many times you will see ये NMS data रहता है, non-filer monitoring system. If you don't file a return of income, they'll go through your form 26AS. They'll see what are the transactions, and they'll reopen saying you have not filed a return of income and therefore income has escaped assessment. Frankly, under explanation to section 147, not filing return of income, there is deemed escape. There is deemed escapement, but there should be income escaping assessment. There should be some income which has escaped assessment. Cases where you have filed a return of income, but they still reopen on the ground that you have so many transactions, but you have not filed a return of income. Therefore, I have reason to believe income has escaped assessment. The entire basis or foundation to reopen is the fact that you have not filed return of income. But if you have filed it, entire basis goes, reassessments cannot be made on such incorrect facts. So these are some of the arguments which are there. Change of opinion.
As you said, if it is not filed, then what is the issue? Now, after that, also whatever it is not filed, then what happens?
Assess कर देगा ना वो.
So assess कर लेगा
based on 26 years. No, if you have not filed return of income originally, and if you have not filed in response to 148, in all probability you will not respond to any of his notices. तो 144 ही करने वाला है.
Before making 148, they issue a draft order nowadays. So if you reply to that draft order against that so forth, in that case, then they will follow that whatever reply you have given, or they will stick to not filing of return.
No, you have not filed a return of income, therefore there will be a base judgment assessment under 144. Okay. Now they have information that ये सब transactions आपके हाथ में हुआ है. If you give a justification, it's not an income chargeable to tax. For example, you have invested in mutual funds. वो सब आपका AIR details में आता है. तो आपने बता दिया उसका source ये है. He may choose not to make any additions. But if he wants to make the addition, he will ignore your submission and make the addition. This is not something which is new. सालों से चलता आ रहा है. They are ignoring our submissions. So this will happen. Change of opinion. Supreme Court, very important finding of Calvinator. AO has no power to review. He has power to reassess. But a reassessment has to be based on fulfillment of certain preconditions. And if the concept of change of opinion is removed as contended by the department, then in the garb of reopening the assessment, review would take place. One must treat the concept of change of opinion as an inbuilt test to check abuse of power by the AO. Read entire section 147, 148, 149, 150, 151. You will not find a single word saying that in case of change of opinion, assessing officer is not entitled to reopen. Not a single word. But the courts have interpreted, in the original assessment, you issued notice, you verified, you were satisfied, you did not make any addition. Now again, you reopen on the basis of the same issue. अब क्या हो रहा है? Assessment order में वो लिख नहीं रहा है. Because if he is not making addition, he'll pass one-page assessment order. Now you again reopen on the basis of the very same issue. Assessing बोले यार कितनी बार तेरे को वही का वही समझाओ. You cannot just keep on asking. Why is he reopening on this ground? Because उसको audit inquiry आया. In most of the cases, when they reopen on an issue which has already been examined, is because of the audit objection. Court say, well, you cannot reopen just because the new assessing officer has a different view about the issue examined by the original assessor. This is not there in the section, but the courts have introduced it by way of their power. Therefore, this proposition of change of opinion will continue even in the new section, because it's an inbuilt test which has been introduced by Supreme Court, and this has to remain. So even in the new section, if there's a prior assessment, issue has been examined, now they want to reopen again on the very same issue, I will rely on calculator and say, boss, you cannot reopen to review your own assessment order. No, then they will argue, नहीं ऐसा तो कुछ section में condition नहीं है. And I'll say it's an inbuilt test which has been prescribed by Supreme Court. You cannot circumvent. We just went through the Supreme Court judgment in case of Parshuram Pottery 106 ITR, the third slide of mine. There has to be a finality to any assessment proceedings. I have come across a case जहाँ पे assessment हुआ 263 on 8 issues, order passed, clean order passed. Again 263 on the very same 8 issues, saying he did not make inquiry in the manner it should have been done. So third time they are revisiting the same facts. This will go on. Therefore, the finality of assessment, you cannot reopen just because there is a change of opinion. Of course, he has verified your unsecured loans in the original assessment. Now there is a fresh information. ये bogus है, ये accommodation entry है, then he can reopen. Because some fresh facts have come into his possession. Yes, sir.
If the AO is silent on the issue is verified, submitted, the submissions are made. It is not writing. There is no speaking order in normal assessment.
Change of opinion. There are Bombay High Court judgments that merely because he has not made any discussion in the assessment order does not mean he has not applied his mind. This is the judgment of this Bombay High Court, where there is a deemed application. If he issues 142 notice, specific query asks depreciation कैसे claim किया है, you have filed a reply. There is no discussion in the assessment order. Now he reopens saying that depreciation has been wrongly claimed. So you will say you have inquired. You will say no, there is no discussion in the assessment order. Courts have said deemed application of money. Once you issue a notice and once it has been replied to, अब assessment order का drafting तो मेरे हाथ में नहीं है. वो जो junior assessment officer ने किया है. And of course he has 100, 200 assessments. If the order is clean, why should he discuss everything in the assessment order? Generally there is an office note. In the assessment order, एक office note रहता है, जो assessee को नहीं देते, वो उनके internal purpose के लिए रहता है. And in most of the cases, wherever there is an audit objection, there is a notice on the assessing officer कि तुमने ये addition क्यों नहीं किया. Assessing officer replies back to the audit wing. This is the reason why I have not made the addition. Of course, he will overrule it and he'll say, "No, you will reopen." Most of the cases based on this reply of the AO, reassessments have been pushed because they say AO has no belief. He is acting on the behalf of audit wing. Audit objection, a deemed application of mind check. You will get all the citations in my presentation. Even audit objection, there is a citation which you will get. So famous Bombay High Court judgment Hindustan Liver, dealing with how to record reasons. Of course, now no longer applicable. Under section 147, the most important protection which an assessee had was prior assessment or reassessment. He reopens after the expiry of 4 years. There has to be a failure on the part of the assessee to disclose truly and fully all material facts. So in many cases, in the reasons recorded, it will say on verification of records, on verification of tax audit report, on verification of P&L account, on verification of computation of income, we have come across this. That means you have gone through my own records and you have reopened. I have already disclosed everything. There is no failure to disclose. You cannot reopen beyond 4 years from the end of the relevant assessment. So very important protection. On this basis, many assessments have been paused, but this protection is now no longer available in the new section. So this argument goes. This is only for the old 148. Interestingly, even this protection third proviso to section 147 says that if any item is subject matter of appeal or revision, qua that item you cannot reopen. For example, AO has made a disallowance of interest expenses, and against the disallowance, I am in appeal before the CIT appeals. So the addition of interest expense is now before the commissioner appeals. Third proviso says if any item of adjustment is subject matter of dispute before the appeal, then that item cannot be reopened. Because of doctrine of अब देख रहा है ना, तो तुम वापस reopen मत करो. That is the logic, doctrine of merger. This proviso again is not there in the new section. I am surprised. So AO makes an addition. For example, you have claimed a deduction of interest expense of 20 lakh rupees. AO says नहीं 10 lakh disallow होना चाहिए because not towards the purpose of business income. For 10 lakhs you are in appeal. Now he wants to reopen कि balance 10 lakh भी disallow होना चाहिए. So I will say this is subject matter of consideration before the appeals. Therefore you cannot reopen. I could have argued, but there is no such protection in the new section. But I can now certainly argue that you have verified this, it amounts to change of opinion. When you make partial addition, it implies that you have applied your mind. And therefore, on the ground of change of opinion, you cannot reopen the assessment. Most important part, deemed escapement of income, which was forming part of explanation 2, has not been continued in the new section. They say, so explanation 2 to section 147 says, in the following cases, it shall be deemed that income has escaped assessment. The first was where no return of income has been filed, deemed that income has escaped assessment. Where return of income has been furnished, but there is no prior assessment. Please mark this. I have filed a return of income, there is no prior assessment, deemed escapement. Also see the last point, where an assessment has been made, but excessive loss or depreciation allowance or any other allowance under this act has been computed. Or I have been assessed to tax at a low rate. In all these cases, it is deemed that income has escaped assessment. This was a protection available to department, which surprisingly is now no longer available to the department in the new section. And how is it impacting, that we'll discuss. (148) Issue of notice prior to reassessment requiring assessee to file return of income. Once you file return of income, all provisions of section 139 should apply. There are 4 or 5 issues. If you have to issue notice under 148, last day is 31st March 22. Such notice should leave the hand of the assessing officer before 31st of March. Backdate करके नहीं कर सकते. Okay. In many cases, I have seen assessees have received email of notice on 1st of April morning 6 or 7. Or 15th of April an unsigned notice has been issued. अगर email मेरे को 1st April को मिला, उसका मतलब ये नहीं कि उसने 31st March को mail कर दिया है and it took time to come to assessee. Email is immediate, which means he has issued the notice on 1st of April, which means the notice is time barred. Issue means it should leave his hands. Where it goes is irrespective. For example, 31st March को उसने post कर दिया, मेरे को 2nd April को मिला, valid. Service is not important, issue is important, but issue मतलब सिर्फ sign करके रखना नहीं. Very recent Allahabad High Court judgment, very recent. It was digitally signed on 31st of signature में, you come to know when it has been signed. Digitally signed on 31st of March, but received by the assessee on 8th of April by way of email. Court says, but merely signing does not mean it has been issued. It has to go leave his hands. Now, their counter argument is, हमने तो portal पे upload कर दिया 31st March को. Uploading on portal is not a valid issuance of notice. Any notice uploading on the portal is not a valid issuance of notice. Firstly, section 280, this is very important. Many people have skipped this. They have circumvented by way of notification. और वो बोल देते कि मैंने पोर्टल पे डाल दिया ना, मतलब तुमको मिल गया. Just to give a very simple example, how do I compare online service and physical service? मान लो इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट आयकर में एक लॉकर सिस्टम है. हर एक एसएससी के नाम पे एक एक लॉकर है, लॉकर का एक चाबी एसएससी के पास, एक चाबी डिपार्टमेंट के पास। आपने आपके रिटर्न ऑफ इनकम में डेट एड्रेस डाल दिया कि मेरे को अगर सर्विस करना है ना तो ये एड्रेस पे दो, डिपार्टमेंट बोलते नहीं, मैं लॉकर खोलूंगा, उसमें मैंने डाल दिया डीम टू हैव बीन सर्व्ड ऑन। The whole concept is incorrect for two reasons. Firstly, you're asking me to give address, तो मैं दे रहा हूं तो दो ना वहां पे, my email address is with you, you're not serving, you're putting it on the portal. Most importantly, why this service is not correct, because one of the key is with them. They can amend the notice, they can change the notice, they can remove the notice. Till the time it goes beyond his control, there is no valid issuance of notice. Section 13 of the Information Technology Act 2000. When does issue take place? When the notice or electronic communication goes outside the server of the person. Issue हो गया. When does service takes place? Is enters a server of the SSC. तो service हुआ. It should be beyond this. I've seen many times notices डाल के वो लोग ने withdraw किया online portal पे. If that is the case, certainly the portal is not beyond their control. Allahabad High Court has stated the same thing. Many times I have seen notice डाला change कर दिया. How does it amount to service? Moreover, Section 282 says service by way of post or by way of email. Post के लिए address rule 127 sub rule 2 ये 4 एड्रेस पे आप कर सकते हो. ईमेल के लिए रूल 127 2B ये 4 ईमेल एड्रेस पे कर सकते हो. At no place they have specified that uploading on the portal amounts to service. Even Act and rule does not specify it. For mere uploading on the portal does not amount to a valid service. If you look at section 144B, faceless assessment, uploading on the portal is a valid service provided it is followed by a real-time alert. And real-time alert is either by way of an SMS on your registered mobile number or by way of an email on your registered email address. It should be followed by that. If it is not followed, certainly मेरे हिसाब से तो ये भी गलत है. Putting on the portal followed by real-time alert is also not a service. अगर तुम alert ही दे रहे हो तो इससे अच्छा notice ही दे दो ना मेरे को. They will put everything to it because then it has entered my resource, my server. It's beyond you. So therefore, mere uploading on the portal is not a valid issuance of service. If at all you have this argument, please raise it. In all your cases, please raise it. Service at wrong address. Many times you see portal पे email address कुछ है, लेकिन गया किसी और email address पे. Service at the wrong address is also fatal.
Notice is issued through email. That also can be recalled within certain time.
थोड़ा benefit of doubt दे देते हैं सब. I understand your point. Can be recalled, but then there has to be some mode. In fact, I will go one step further. चलो बॉम्बे में तो सब लोग are very well, aware about the technology. You go to mofussil areas. अमरावती, नागपुर, कौन email वापरता है? कौन portal वापरता है? How do you serve them? And we have seen cases where it has been uploaded on the portal and served on the email address. So what happens? Faceless, they'll issue notice. If you don't reply to 2 or 3 notices, you are declared as non-compliant. Once you are declared non-compliant, then your case gets transferred to verification unit, and then the verification unit has to issue you a physical notice. और जब physical notice आता है ना 6-7 महीने के बाद, तब समझते हैं कि केस खुला है. So this is what happens. So चलो हम लोग को तो फिर भी we have some knowledge about computer systems, but many places people don't even have email ID. Where do you go if you want to convert everything to faceless? How do you, and if you want to file a bulky submission, कैसे upload करेंगे? Because of the limitations, this, that. So they say that we will have a system at Aikar Bhavan. You can come here. Video conferencing. Who will know Zoom app? आपको और मेरे को पता है because we are frequently listening to Mulund Study Circle का lectures. But in Amravati, Nagpur, and all those interior places, who will even understand Zoom application, video conferencing? Very good. It's going to be difficult, at least in the initial 5-6 years, maybe then people will have to get used to this, or maybe then they will have to change, whatever it is. Notice cannot be issued in the name of a deceased person, very well settled. Not in case of an entity which was in existence, got amalgamated or got converted into LLP, you cannot issue notice. Again, now this aspect of service and issue of notice continues in the new section, because 148 has been retained, the issue of notice and filing of return of income. Once I file return of income, it is deemed to have been filed under 139(1), and therefore if you want to complete the assessment, you have to issue 143(2). If you don't issue 143(2), thing goes. Same thing has continued. Time limit 4 years, 6 years, and 16 years. 16 years in case of undisclosed foreign assets. This remains. This has changed now. Section 150 remains as it is. To give a very simple example of section 150, my assessment for AY 17-18 has been reopened. They want to tax capital gain in the year in which agreement was executed, not registered. So 17-18 they reopen and they tax me. But I say nahi, the agreement was registered in 18-19. But in 18-19 I have now offered it to tax. So if I go to tribunal or if I go to CIT appeal, tribunal say nahi, ye saal mein tax nahi kar sakte. You can tax it in the year in which registration takes place. By the time 18-19 the time limit to scrutinize under 143(3) has lapsed. Say for example, tribunal ka judgment aaya after 6 years. Time limit to reopen has lapsed. Therefore, section 150, it says, in consequence or to give effect to order of a tribunal or any appellate authority, you can reopen without any time limit under 149. This is the main purpose of section 150. Sanctioning authority, if it is reopened beyond 4 years, you have to take sanction of principal, chief commissioner, principal commissioner, commissioner. And if it is within 4 years, then joint commissioner or additional commissioner. Sanction means proper sanction with application of mind. तुमको देखना है क्या लिखा है. Very recently, Bombay High Court judgment, there used to be a sanction form, details giving prior assessment, return, ये वो सब, along with the reasons recorded. That entire bunch was to be forwarded to the principal commissioner for his sanction. अब क्या हो गया, उसने sanction form में whether any voluntary return filed, उसने लिखा था no. Reasons में assessee has filed his return of income on so and so. Okay. 2. Whether any prior assessment, yes. If yes, assessed income. अब उसने assessed income का figure लिखा था जो ना returned income figure. So when this was argued before the High Court, we argued there is the application of mind. He is saying no return filed. In the reasons he is saying return filed. The income assessed, he is giving figure of returned income. Complete non-application of mind. On this sole point, reassessment was paused. Non-application of mind. It was 151. But approval ही क्यों चाहिए ना? Approval is to see that that person is performing satisfactorily. He is doing his job properly. So you have to verify. For example, what happens beyond 4 years? There has to be a failure on the part of the assessee to disclose truly fully, which requires the assessing officer to go through the assessment record. अगर मेरे को पता करना है कि ये बंदे ने सब कुछ डिस्क्लोज किया है कि नहीं, where should I go? I have to go to his assessment records. When he says assessed income is so and so, which is a wrong figure, it implies कि इसने मेरा assessment records देखा ही नहीं है. How has he even formed a conclusion there is a failure on the part of the assessor? So therefore, on this count itself, the courts have paused. In fact, while giving his comments, the principal commissioner should give a comment. Yes, I am satisfied. Based on these reasons, AO has rightly issued 148 notice. In many cases, they simply write approved. Yes, this is a fit case. They simply write this. Courts have held approved likha na, matlab you have not applied your rights. The notice has been paused. Supreme Court judgment. S. Goenka Lime and Chemicals Limited, Chugmal Rajpal. Simply writing approved. Of course, there are also judgments that if the approval has to be given by principal commissioner but given by joint commissioner, or it should be given by joint commissioner but given by principal commissioner, approval of wrong authority is bad in law. All these arguments will continue in the new section, because there again there's a requirement of approval, but the requirement of approval is so strict and at each and every step which we'll go through. The procedure of assessment, old assessment, I think we can skip that because no longer one is required to follow that procedure. Just I'll briefly state. AO has to record his reasons. AO has to take approval under section 151 of the principal commissioner or joint commissioner. After getting the approval, AO has to issue notice under section 148. I file my return of income. Now Supreme Court judgment in case of GK and drive shaft comes into picture. It says that to please ask for reasons. If you ask for reasons, he has to give you reasons recorded. Once he gives you reasons recorded, you file your objections. Based on the objections, AO has to pass an order disposing the objections, which can be challenged in a writ petition before a high court directly, because then the notice under section 148, if it is without the jurisdiction, article 226 writ petition can be entertained. Old Supreme Court 41 idea, Calcutta discount. If you don't want to challenge, continue with the assessment, take the reassessment order, can file appeal. In the appeal, you can also challenge on the ground that reassessment is not valid. Both things possible. This very same mechanism of getting reasons, objecting, getting order, disposing of objections is now there under section 148A, which happens prior to issue of notice, which we'll see in the later slides, that they have continued this in the new section, and now GK and drive shaft pura ka pura उन लोगों ने section में डाल दिया है. You can therefore file your objections and get the order saying whether notice under 148 has to be issued. Just that the difference is, old regime mein after 148 they'll do this procedure. In the new regime, before issuing 148 they will do this procedure. So we'll start with the new provisions. New provisions you will please mark is for reassessment, search and survey. One common section for search related assessments, reassessments and survey related assessments. We have already discussed that 143 order has to be passed within 9 months from the end of the assessment year. Now the system has become technologically driven. They get information from Insights portal. For example, assessment year 21-22, last day to complete the assessment is 31st December 2022. 9 months from the end of the assessment year. 23 में किसी के यहाँ पे search हुआ और उसको मालूम पड़ा कि I have taken bogus accommodation entry. This information comes later on, which is updated on the Insight portal. वो Insight portal मेरे assessing officer को दिखेगा कि इस PAN में ये information आया है. Then he'll reopen my assessment. अब ये normal scrutiny assessment होता तो 2023 में मेरा scrutiny चलता होता, during which course he could have received the information and you made the addition in the scrutiny assessment. But since the time limit has reduced to complete the assessment, mostly now you will be handling 148A cases. You must have also experienced कि 143(2) का notices कितना कम हो गया. One of the reasons is because of COVID, they didn't want to trouble assessees. But another reason is this: they are collating information. AIR से आता है, GST से आता है, TDS का reports रहता है, 285B का transactions रहता है. सब collate करके they'll get some big information chunk. Sometimes you will receive notices saying कि आपके केस में ये information है, do you want to give any justification? Whether have you included this? If you reply they're satisfied, okay. If you don't reply, or if you reply and they're not satisfied, there's an information in your Insight portal and they'll have to reopen your assessment. So now mostly the cases would be 148. There will be no scrutiny assessment. And therefore I personally presume 148 within 3 years is new 143(3). If you look at the requirements of section to reopen the assessment, they only need an information which suggests income as escape assessment. That information can be fourfold based on risk management strategy. अभी ये क्या term ना आज तक मेरे को नहीं समझा. Where is this strategy? Risk management strategy prescribed by the board. I don't know. We can ask Priti Ben to make a reference. What is this strategy? Please make us understand. 2. Audit objection. 3. Information under e-verification scheme notified under section 135. They have specified a scheme under 135 to collect information from the assessees. And 4. Any information received from any other country. The 4 information hai na, that means there is an information which suggests income escape assessment and they can reopen. So therefore, frankly speaking, they have an information saying iska cash deposits hai, but he has filed return of income, but return of income is not commensurate or proportionate to the cash deposits or bank credits. I have come across a new reason. There are credits in your bank account, but you have shown only this much income. Therefore, I have reason to believe income is escape assessment. In one of my arguments, I asked the judge, there are credits in my lord's account. They can reopen. Just because there are credits in the bank account, can they reopen? Where is the finding income as escape assessment? You want to reopen under 143.2, you can reopen there because there is no prior condition. But for 147, there should be an income escaping assessment. Where is that finding? Just because there are some credits in the bank account, you will reopen. Unheard of, but now it is happening. And this is the future of litigation, according to me. Because they get all the information on the inside portal. Somebody is doing some verification. DG system, DG verification, there is some system formulated and they are doing the verification. The central circle which conducts search, the investigation thing in central circle, they upload information on the inside portal, which gets then distributed to all the assessees. Based on that, they reopen. So therefore, according to me, 148 within 3 years is actually new 143. Of course, with an added protection that you can argue there is no proper approval, there is no income which is escape assessment, all these arguments which one can take. Now we start with our main section, section 147. So I hope that old section is clear in everybody's mind, 147. Let us now compare the old section with the new section. Old section, if AO has reason to believe income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. These were the initial words. Please read 147 new. If any income chargeable to tax in case of an assessee has escaped assessment. So reason to believe has gone. And if one remembers, courts have held reason to believe means a prima facie finding. There should not be a conclusive finding ki income escape hua hai ki nahi. At the stage of reopening, he has to only form a belief. Yeah, ye dekh ke mere ko lag raha hai income has escaped assessment. He should not conclude it. There is no requirement of conclusion. Supreme Court, Gujarat High Court, Bombay High Court, many high courts. But now, under new section 147, if any income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, then the AO may assess or reassess. So according to me now, only if you have a valid information that income has really escaped assessment, you can reopen. You had this protection, the department had this protection. Ki mere ko sirf reason to believe chahiye. That's gone. Now you need to have conclusive finding ki income escape hua hai ki nahi. Drafting has taken a very bad hit. Last 6 to 7 years, I have seen drafting of section is pathetic to say the least. I remember section 115BAB, beneficial rate of 15% if you're into the manufacturing sector. This section was announced by way of an ordinance by our Honorable Finance Minister sitting in Goa. When it was converted into Act, there were 6 provisos added to take care of lacunas. 6 provisos added. Completely game has changed. Penalty section 270A. Please read the section, how it has been drafted. The moment that A minus B plus C minus D surfaced into Income Tax Act, that time you realized that drafting has gone from Law Ministry to Finance Ministry. किसी lawyer के हाथ से निकल के किसी finance के बंदे में चला गया. हाँ? हाँ, go. Whatever it is. So you see so many sections, pathetic drafting. Now, for example, here, my argument is, unless and until you prove income as escape assessment, you cannot reopen. Because now there is no requirement of reason to believe. You have to simply say income has escaped assessment. Please read further. AO assessing officer may, subject to provisions of section 148 to 153, assess or reassess such income or recompute the loss or depreciation allowance or any other allowance or deduction for such assessment year. For the purpose of assessment or reassessment or recomputation, AO may reassess the income in respect of any issue which has escaped assessment, and such issue comes to his notice subsequently in the course of proceeding, irrespective of the fact that the provisions of section 148A has not been complied. This is it. This is section 147. पहले हमारे इधर 3 प्रोवाइजो था, 2-4 एक्सप्लेनेशन था, वो सब चला गया. Only section 147 and an explanation. Reason to believe has been removed. For my first argument is, now you have to conclude that there is an escapement of income only, then you can reopen the assessment. 147 is the main assessment section. So your orders would be 144B, read with section 143(3), read with section 147. This is an assessment section. If there is no 147, they cannot assess you. This is the main, what we call charging section and machinery provisions. Similarly, for assessment, we say this is the main assessment section. The machinery provisions of 148A also apply. Section starts with if income has escaped assessment, then AO may assess, reassess. Escapement of income is must. Then only you can assess or reassess. Please keep these wordings in mind. If income has escaped assessment, we'll compare this wording with section 148 में explanation है, proviso है. We'll compare this wording with that. My first argument is if income has escaped assessment. What do you mean by assessment? Section 29 defines assessment to include reassessment. Supreme Court in case of Rajesh Jhaveri stockbrokers 291 ITR has held that an intimation under 143(1) is not an assessment. Therefore, can I say that only if there is an assessment under 143(3) or 147 that you can reopen under 147? Because then one can say income has escaped assessment. This is where explanation 2 to old section 147. I had asked everybody to remember explanation 2 to section 147, which says that in the following cases, it is deemed that income has escaped assessment. Clause B stated that return has been filed, but no assessment has been made. So explanation ही नहीं है. Therefore, can I argue income escaping assessment? For that, there should be prior assessment in place. आर्ग्यू करेंगे फर्स्ट 3-4 केस में फेवरेबल आ जाएगा, फिर रिट्रोस्पेक्टिव अमेंडमेंट आ जाएगा. Concept of failure to disclose fully and truly all material facts has been removed. The first proviso. Cases where the matters are subject matter of any appeal, reference, revision, third proviso, which we discussed earlier, is not forming part. So even if on a particular issue you have filed an appeal to your CIT appeals or tribunal, still they can reopen. But my argument here would be change of opinion. Because if you applied your mind, you cannot then again reopen on the very same issue, because Supreme Court in Calvinator says this is an inbuilt test. Therefore, you cannot reopen. Deemed escapement in explanation 2 not present in the new section. Lot many complications. I am sorry. The presentation which is coming here might have some different. I have added something which is not forming part of your presentation, so that Himanshu will send it by way of email. के बाद में पढ़ते तो और सोचते रहते. Already sent. Already sent. I am told it's already sent. So जैसे जैसे पढ़ते नए arguments develop होता है. So that is why I have made some changes. Now please again read this. If any income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, he may assess or reassess such income or recompute loss or depreciation allowance or other allowance or deduction. Pause here. My argument is I have claimed loss of 5 crores. Now you have a reason, forget reason to believe, you think that 2 crore का loss मैंने wrongly claim किया है. You want to reopen to disallow loss of 2 crores. Can you do it? My answer is no. there is no income which is escaped assessment. You want to recompute the loss. To satisfy the threshold, section 147 says if income has escaped assessment, then reassess such income. So income, according to me, is a positive term, positive income. Otherwise, there was no need to write or recompute the loss or depreciation allowance or other allowance or deduction. Can they reopen to reduce my loss or depreciation? Again, here if you read explanation 2 to old section 147, excessive claim of depreciation or loss or allowance is deemed escapement. वो यहाँ पे नहीं. So therefore, my personal view, again वापस वो लोग amendment करके explanation 2 लेके आ जाएंगे, but you cannot reopen to reduce my loss or depreciation because there is no income chargeable to tax escaping assessment. I can foresee a counter argument that as per Supreme Court judgment in case of Badridas Zaga 57 ITR, income includes loss. But then what was the need to write such income or recompute loss or depreciation or any other allowance? So a drafting mess. There they had defined income escaping assessment by way of a deeming fiction in explanation 2, which is not present here, because of which all these issues are cropping up. 2. Second part of the section is they can add this income or any other income which comes to their notice subsequently. So in context of old section 147, we had this Bombay High Court judgment in case of Jet Airways 331 ITR 236. If they reopen to assess A item, then they can add B item, provided A item is added. So say for example, if they reopen to disallow interest expenses, okay, now during the course of assessment proceedings, they find out, nahi tumko to accommodation entry mila hai, penny stock. And interest ke liye you give a justification, it is for the purpose of business. So they will not add interest, but unko ek bada machli mil gaya, so they will add the penny stock transaction. So my simple argument before the CIT appeal would be, when you don't make the original edition, original item which was subject matter of reassessment, you cannot add any other item upheld by the Bombay High Court in Jet Airways. The reason being, wordings of old section 147. He may assess or reassess such income and any other income which comes to his notice. The Supreme Court has interpreted the word and. They say, no, you have to assess, reassess such income and other income. If you don't assess or reassess such income, you cannot assess the other income. Now that entire wordings have been removed now. So therefore, under the new scheme, they can tax you on item B, C, D, even if they don't tax item A. So that argument has gone. But the most important point is, which comes to his notice, वो खोदने नहीं जा रहा है, उसके ध्यान में आ गया, he should not make fishing and rowing inquiries. He should make inquiries restricted to the issue. If you give a reply and he finds out something, then he can do. But what we have seen is, once a 147 notice is issued, एक 142 का questionnaire आता है, 25-30 points लिखा रहता है, and you have to file reply. So for example, if it is open for bogus purchases, they will ask you unsecured loans, they will ask you share application money. He cannot make fishing rowing inquiries. In fact, in context of SOPs issued under faceless assessment scheme, so they have issued some SOPs that how you should complete the faceless assessments. In that SOP, they have strictly specified that if reopening is on A issue, please restrict your questionnaire to A issue. Cannot go beyond A issue. This has been specified in their SOPs. So you please restrict yourself to A issue. उस A issue के inquiry के दौरान, if you come across something else, then you can then you can add that amount. Now again, here there is a big problem. For this addition of some other item is because of the explanation to section 147. For the purposes of assessment or reassessment or recomputation under this section, assessing officer may assess or reassess the income in respect of any issue which has escaped assessment, and such issue comes to his notice subsequently in the course of proceeding. An example: I have offered income under the head income from house property, and I have offered income under the head business income. He reopens on the ground that the expenses the depreciation which you have claimed is in respect of the house property for which you are offering income under the head house property. If you do not get depreciation under the head business income, very well. He reopens on this ground. In my return of income, I have also claimed carry forward of losses, long-term capital losses of 2 crores, which cannot be set off against any other head of income. Therefore, I have claimed it as a carry forward of loss. Now, in the course of assessment, he says, "Ye loss galat claim hua hai." Assuming he satisfies the condition that he is not taking fishing roving inquiry, and it comes to his notice during the course of assessment proceeding. Can he disallow this loss is the issue. Because on this issue, he has not reopened. Now again, we read explanation. For the purposes of assessment or reassessment or recomputation under this section, assessing officer may assess, reassess income in respect of any issue. Here they have not used the word or recompute the loss or depreciation allowance or any other allowance or deduction. Only words used are income. Therefore, they cannot make any adjustment in respect of depreciation or other allowances for which purpose it has not been reopened, which is the secondary item, not the first item. Again, a drafting error. So we now come to section 148. Now I have reproduced the section. Section where there are some things which are marked in red. These things are proposed by Finance Bill 2022 with retrospective effect with effect from 1/4/21. Finance Act has only been passed by the Lok Sabha, not yet passed by Rajya Sabha, and the assent of the President has not yet been received. If it is no longer it is not an act at this stage, it will become an act. Therefore, I am saying that these red items are proposed amendments in the income tax. What does section 148 says? Before making any assessment, reassessment, or recomputation under section 147, I have to give meaning to this first phrase. Assessment, reassessment happens under section 147, not under section 148. 147 is the main assessment section. To give effect to 147, there are other sections of 148, 148A. And therefore, the condition of 147, income escaped assessment, becomes critical. You have to demonstrate income as escaped assessment. And subject to the provisions of section 148A, the assessing officer shall serve on the assessee a notice along with a copy of the order passed if required under clause D of section 148A, requiring him to furnish within such period a return of income verified in a prescribed form and verified in the prescribed manner, and so far as may be apply, and the provisions of this act shall so far as may be apply accordingly, as if such return were a return required to be furnished under section 139. So apart from that reference to 148A, entire section is same as the original one. Please see the proviso which places a restriction on his power. No notice under this section shall be issued unless A, there is information with the AO which suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. In case of the assessee for the relevant assessment year, and assessing officer has obtained approval of the specified authority to issue such notice. So before issuing any notice under section 148, at least two conditions have to be fulfilled, which is AO must have some information in his possession which suggests that income has escaped assessment, and there should be prior approval of the specified authority. These are not the only two conditions. The other conditions are specified under section 148A, which we will see later on. Provided further that no such approval shall be required where the AO, with the prior approval of the specified authority, has passed an order under section 148A clause D to the effect that it is a fit case to issue notice. Under 148A, they issue you a show cause notice कि हमारे पास ये information है You please show cause why I should not issue 148 notice. We'll file a reply. They'll pass an order saying we have considered your submission, but we feel this is a fit case to issue notice under section 148. Issue of show cause notice, passing of order under 148A are subject to prior approval of specified authority. Once prior approval of specified authority is taken for passing the order, there is no subsequent requirement of prior approval before issue of notice. उधर एक अप्रूवल मिल गया, उधर वापस एक अप्रूवल नहीं चाहिए, वही सेकंड प्रोविजो में क्लैरिफाई किया. Explanation 1. For the purposes of this section and section 148A, please read this carefully. Only for the purpose of this section and section 148A. This is not for the purpose of section 147. Information with the AO which suggests that income has escaped assessment means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A. Any information, earlier they had used the word flag, which is now proposed to be removed by the Finance Bill 22. Any information in case of the SSC for the relevant assessment year in accordance with the risk management strategy formulated by the board. Earlier, clause 2 was any final objection raised by Comptroller and Auditor General of India to the effect that assessment in case of the SSC for the relevant assessment year has not been made in accordance with the provisions of the Act. Now replaced by 2, 3, 4, 5. Any audit objection to the effect that assessment in case of the SSC for the relevant year has not been made in accordance with the provisions of the Act. हमारा audit objection वाला argument गया. Any information received under an agreement referred to in section 90 and 90A of the Act. Foreign jurisdictions say if they receive some information, in most cases they will not proceed under the Income Tax Act, they will proceed under the Black Money Act. Any information made available to the AO under the scheme notified under section 135A. Faceless collection of information under 135 is a scheme notified. वो लोग कहीं-कहीं से information collect करके summons issue करके they can provide the information to the assessing officer. Or any information which requires action in consequence of the order of a tribunal or court is appears familiar. This is section 150, which we just discussed. For the purpose of this section, where 1, 2, 3, 4 has happened, assessing officers shall be deemed to have information which suggests that income chargeable to tax is a sickness. In the following 4 cases, deemed to have information that the income has escaped assessment. Okay, पहले लिखा था for 3 years preceding the year. Now this explanation 2 deals with search in case of a person, survey in case of a person. या फिर किसी के यहाँ पे search हुआ है and some materials, some assets, some documents have been found which belong to a third party. Prior section 153C. All these cases deemed to have information which suggests that income has escaped assessment. Pehle, the deeming fiction was only for 3 years prior to the years of search and survey. Now they have removed that word 3 years. So deemed to have information which suggests income has escaped assessment for all prior 10 years. Okay. चलो एक बार search में मैं मानता हूँ you had 153 and 153C where you could have reopened for 6 years or 10 years, but even in case of survey, deemed to have information which suggests income has escaped assessment. So what are the issues arising in section 148? Firstly, we have already discussed before making any assessment, reassessment under section 147, which means some machinery provision, main assessment under section 147, you have to fulfill the condition of 147, which is income escaping assessment. Requirement to issue notice and filing of return of income continues. That requirement of issuing notice under 149 and have to file return of income continues. Therefore, all the case laws and controversies and litigation attached to issue of notice will continue, which is such notice must leave AO's hand before the last day. Notice cannot be issued on deceased assessee or an entity which is no longer in existence. Notice should be issued at the correct address, email address. And after I file my return of income, a 143(2) notice has to be issued to complete the assessment. So these all controversies which were there in the old regime continues in the new regime. Before issuing notice under section 148, there is a new procedure prescribed under section 148A. You must be receiving notices under section 148A, clause B, show cause notice, to demonstrate why a notice under section 148 should not be issued. Two prima facie conditions. There is information with the AO which suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, and prior approval of specified authority, except the order has been passed under section 148 AD with the prior approval. Explanation 1. Information which suggests that income has escaped assessment has been defined in an exhaustive manner. ये 5 केस में fit हुआ, then only he can reopen. Otherwise, there cannot be any 6th case where information has been received which suggests income has escaped assessment. What are the 5 issues? First, any information in case of the SSC in accordance with the risk management strategy. Oh, what is this? I don't know. If anybody has any clue what is risk management strategy, please explain to me. But where is it? No, I understand. But where is it? For example, no, but that becomes very important. Because I want to know if the issue on which they are reopening is forming part of risk management strategy or not. If it is not, and they're simply reopening, I can challenge it. How will I come to know what is their risk management strategy? So, for example, they have reopened on A issue. Okay, it's not forming part of clause 2, 3, 4, 5. Audit objection, information under section 1990A, information under section 135, or in consequence to any order. Therefore, it falls in 1. How will I come to know whether this issue forms part of a risk management strategy? In fact, this was the precise argument. If you are aware, faceless appeal scheme was challenged by Chamber of Tax Consultants before the Bombay High Court, and we had Mr. Arvind Datar arguing for the Chamber of Tax Consultants. There was a provision for review of order by one commissioner appeals of another commissioner appeals. आपका assessment में कैसा है कि draft order pass करेगा, फिर it will be sent to a review unit. वो review करने के बाद final assessment order is being passed. Same conditions under faceless appeal. So one commissioner order appeal will pass a draft order, which will be sent for review to another commissioner appeals based on risk management strategy prescribed. So we argued, what is this risk management strategy? And the government had no answer. What is the risk management strategy? Of course, now they have come out with a new faceless appeal scheme, and all this review and everything has been removed from the new faceless appeal scheme. But really, we don't know. So tomorrow, if I want to argue that you could not have reopened, there is no information we suggest. For them, it is very easy to say it falls in 1. How will I come to know it falls in 1 or not? This they have to specify unless and until they specify. Or if I challenge, you prove it is under risk management strategy, they have to demonstrate it is under risk management strategy. Otherwise, the reassessment fails. Second clause is any audit objection to the effect that assessment in case of the SSC has not been made in accordance with the provisions of the Act. So firstly, you must have noticed the word assessment is not made in accordance with the provisions of the Act, which means clause 2 can be invoked only if there is a prior assessment. Then only you can invoke clause 2, otherwise you cannot invoke clause 2. The audit objections to state that assessment has not been made in accordance with the provisions of the Act, which means they have to come to some, they have to form some opinion, they have to come to some conclusion. There should be some reasonable opinion to show that assessment has not been made in accordance with the provision of the Act. However, if this issue was considered by the original assessing officer, then I can take the argument that you are reopening, and this reopening is bad in law because it is merely on the basis of change of opinion. Change of opinion is an inbuilt test as per the Supreme Court in case of Calvinator. Our argument that merely on the basis of audit objection you cannot reopen now goes. The third item is, please see the wordings. For the purpose of this section and section 148A, information with the AO suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment means any information received under an agreement referred to in 1998. That information which you are received under section 90 or 90A, it should suggest that income has escaped assessment. Not any information. If he has received information that a person has a residential property in Dubai, how does that suggest that income has escaped assessment? If he has an information that assessee is a director in a Dubai company, he is a signatory in a bank account in a Dubai company, how does that suggest income has escaped assessment? But look at the wordings. Look at clause 2 and clause C. Compare. Any audit objection to the effect assessment has not been made in accordance with the provision of the act. So here they have to form a belief कि ये ऐसा होना चाहिए था लेकिन ऐसा हुआ है. But C3, any information received under an agreement referred to under section 90 or 90A, उसके बाद वाला लिखना भूल गए, which suggests that income has escaped assessment. Similarly, see the next clause. Any information made available to the AO under the scheme notified under section 135A. 135A में वो लोगों ने verification किया, verification में find out किया कि assessee has credits in the bank account to the tune of rupees 5 lakh, to the tune of rupees 10 lakhs. So what? Where is the income? Where is the information which suggests income has escaped assessment? Or we have come across some new reasons this time. Assessee has shown income of rupees 25 lakhs, but he has purchased a property worth rupees 5 crores. So the investment is not proportionate to his return. भाई मेरा पहले का return देखो. I have offered so much income. Look at my capital balance. How can you just say that इस साल का income is 50 lakhs or 25 lakhs? How could you have purchased a property worth rupees 5 crores? Such cases, the Bombay High Court has quashed the reassessment. This cannot be a reason to believe income has escaped assessment. Therefore, any information made available to the AO under the scheme notified under section 135A should be an information which suggests that income has escaped assessment. Assuming for a moment the department takes the argument that we should only have an information, we will reopen. Whether or not it suggests any income escaping assessment, then my counter argument is you still have to satisfy the condition of 147, which says if an income has escaped assessment, you can assess or reassess. In fact, this strengthens my argument. This clause strengthens my argument that the jurisdictional requirement of 147, there should be a prior conclusion income has escaped assessment necessary to reopen the assessment. The last item is any information which requires action in consequence of the order of a tribunal or a court. Really speaking, I could not gather what this is trying to suggest. Any information which requires action in consequence of the order of a tribunal or court, it appears that if there is any tribunal order or a court order or any other court's order, which is not received by the assessing officer of the assessee, but received by some other assessing officer, he will upload that information on the portal, and based on that information, he will issue notice because it is an information which suggests that income has escaped assessment. This is primarily to give effect to section 150. Now let us compare the wordings of section 147 and first proviso to section 148. If any income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, is the jurisdictional requirement of 147. 148, no notice under section 148 shall be issued unless AO has any information which suggests that income has escaped assessment. So 147 का requirement है income escaping assessment. 148 का requirement है he should have information in his possession which suggests that income has escaped assessment. How do I reconcile these two? Firstly, AO will have an information which suggests that income has escaped assessment. Once he receives the information, he has to carry out an inquiry under section 148A. He has to issue show cause, he has to pass an order. In the order, he has to conclude that income has escaped assessment to satisfy the condition of section 147. Two conditions are different. To initiate information suggesting escapement, to initiate 148A. But to issue 148 notice, there has to be an income which has escaped assessment. We have also seen that explanation 1 to section 148, it's only for the purpose of section 148 and 148A and not for the purpose of 147. Now, in the following situations, there is deemed that AO has information which has escaped assessment. First condition, search is initiated under section 132 or books of accounts, documents or assets are requisitioned under section 132A on or after 1st April 21. किसी client के यहाँ पे search हुआ after 1st of April 21. It is deemed that AO has information which suggests income has escaped assessment. Second case, survey under section 133A in case of an assessee on or after 1st of April 21. Again, here there is a deeming fiction that AO has information which suggests income has escaped assessment. Third case, now please see the wordings of third scenario, where AO is satisfied with the prior approval of principal, commissioner or commissioner that any money, bullion, jewelry or valuable article or thing seized or requisition belongs to the assessee. Search in case of A party, वहाँ पे कुछ assets मिला है, and he says that this belongs to B party. Similar to 153C. But there are two prior conditions to be fulfilled. There has to be a satisfaction recorded by the assessing officer, where AO is satisfied. Such satisfaction has to be recorded with the prior approval of commissioner, principal, commissioner. Assuming he has recorded a satisfaction, but prior approval of principal, commissioner is not taken, gone. Jurisdictional condition not satisfied. Last, where AO is satisfied with the prior approval of principal or commissioner that any books of accounts or documents seized or requisition in case of any person pertains or pertain to, or any information contained therein relate to the assessee. ये एक controversy which is ongoing right now. Section 153C has also been amended. पहले क्या था? Any books of accounts, documents or evidences found belong to the assessee, 153C can be invoked. For example, there is a search in case of A. A has transferred property to B. A के यहाँ पे कैश मिला. A बोलते हैं on money. Based on that sale deed. If they wanted to reopen prior to 1st of July 2015 under 153C, then they should form a satisfaction that this sale deed belongs to B. Okay, courts have taken a view, nahi, this sale deed belongs to A. You cannot reopen B. Second example, there is a search in case of a party who has agreed that he is issuing accommodation bills. He has copy of bills with him. एक copy वो लोग रखते हैं. Based on that bills, AO wants to reopen assessment of B party who has purchased goods from him. If he wants to do under 153C, he will say that the bills found here belongs to B. The answer is no. Bills found here belongs to A. B ka copy alag hai. You could not have issued notice under 153C. We have Delhi High Court, Gujarat High Court on this point. Therefore, they amended the section. Now they say documents, evidence found here either belong to B or any information contained therein relate to B. So ये भले इसका है, but इसके अंदर information मिला है जो B का है. In that situation as well, they can reopen or they can issue notice under 153C. This amendment was with effect from 1st July 2015, if I'm not wrong. So now what happens is there is this controversy. Because of this phrase, information contained therein relate to B. My assessing officer receives information that there was a search and that information pertains to you or relates to you. ये 153C करेगा या 148 करेगा? Because he can also issue 148. So will he issue 148 or will he issue 153C? Reason being 153C prior 6 years get over. 148 he has to form reason to believe for that very year. Of course, there is a Supreme Court judgment in case of Sinhagarh Technical Education Society which says that even under 153C you can reopen only that year in respect of which material has been found. So therefore, there was this controversy which is still going on under the old regime. कि 153C करना चाहिए या 147 करना चाहिए. In my humble opinion, it doesn't really make any difference. He can do whatever he wants to do. But there are court judgments, especially if I remember, there is a Madras High Court judgment. It says if you fall under 153A or 153C, AO cannot issue 147. So now that controversy has gone. Now everything is to be done under section 148. But under 148, what will happen? If there is any information which pertains to a person or relates to a person, then it is deemed that your income, there is an information which suggests that income has escaped assessment. Such deeming fiction earlier was for only 3 years preceding the year of search. Please see, I have cancelled 3. They have removed this 3. Now they can reopen for any years. So therefore, the conclusion is this, that if there is a search, if there is a survey, or if I am a third party in respect of which information has been found, I cannot take an argument that there is no information which suggests income has escaped assessment. Argument of proviso to section 148 is not available. But I can certainly take an argument that still income has to escape assessment under 147. So you can reopen, issue notice under 148 saying ये gold मिला था. But if I explain a gold is explainable, source explained iska, then you cannot issue 147. This only deems that they have an information which suggests income has escaped. The condition of 147 income has really escaped assessment or not has to be still fulfilled. If I compare 153A, 153C with the new regime 148, 153A, 153C may automatically reopen 6 years. They can go from 6 to 10 years if they have certain information which reveal income has escaped assessment represented in the form of asset. It was a new proviso in 153A. So पहले 6-10 साल था, but in the new section prior to amendment it was only 3 years, but with the amendment proposed they can reopen any year. Survey under 133A, there was no prior section for any special assessment procedure in pursuance of survey. They used to reopen under 148. Now again they'll do it under 148, but they are given special protection because there is a deemed suggestion that income has escaped assessment. Only that argument one cannot take. But apart from that, all other arguments are available. Tds survey is not covered. There is a specific survey section in 133A, subsection 2A, which gives power. In my humble opinion, it gives power only to Tds wing to carry out a survey to find out if Tds बरोबर काटा है, पे हुआ है कि नहीं. Assuming they found certain discrepancy, they will not issue 148. They'll issue 201 notice, assessee in default. So therefore, Tds survey is not covered under section under this deemed suggestion. Earlier, even a survey under section 133(5), आपके यहाँ पे कुछ मैरिज फंक्शन वगैरह है तो वो पहुंच जाते थे पहले, that your expenditure is proper or not to verify, which was earlier not covered in deemed suggestion, but by this proposed amendment it is now getting covered. So the argument that there has to be an escapement of income nevertheless still continues. The argument of abated, unabated assessment under 153A, 153C, Bombay High Court judgment, continental shelf, all cargo, global logistics, etc., will now no longer apply. That controversy goes with section 153A. In search cases, in survey cases, though they have information which suggests income as escaped assessment, but they still will have to qualify for the condition prescribed under section 149. 3 साल के बाद 10 साल तक करना है, then they have to satisfy a condition income escaping assessment is represented in the form of asset of more than 50 lakh rupees. So search हुआ है, there is a deemed information, but 149 1B condition will still have to be fulfilled. Also, one last point which comes to my mind is, if you again look at the section 148, so there is this section 148, then there are two provisos. First proviso says you cannot issue unless information and unless approval. Second proviso says approval not required if prior order under 148 AD is passed. Then there are two explanations. Explanation A says information suggesting income escape assessment means the following information. And explanation B says in the following cases, it is deemed that there is an information which suggests. Let us compare explanation 1 and 2. I get a simple result that explanation 1 is not a deeming fiction. Explanation 2 is a deeming fiction. In case of search survey, deemed information. But in case of a case where there is no search survey, I fall in explanation 1, 5 clauses, audit objection, risk management strategy, etc. This is not a deeming fiction. I can challenge. There is no information which suggests that income is escape assessment. Sometimes by looking at different provisions, we get help from the provisions itself. So I'm done with section 148. Now let us go to section, I'm sorry, something left, 153C. Yeah, sorry, 153C type of cases. Here there are two approvals required. AO of the SSC will have to record satisfaction with the prior approval of principal commission. Now mind you, please take note of this. Whenever they reopen your assessment, based on information found in case of some other party, you have to take this argument that there is an information or documentary evidence or material books of accounts found in case of some other party which relates to me. Therefore, they are reopening. For example, प्रवीण कुमार जैन और मुकेश चोकसी के केस में सर्च हुआ था, उसका कंप्यूटर में लिस्ट आया था जिसमें मैंने इसी चीज को अकोमोडेशन एंट्री दिया. What they do is, we have received information from investigation wing. So and so parties engaged in accommodation entry. You are a beneficiary of one of the accommodation entry. Therefore, I have reason to believe income as escape assessment. This controversy of 148 versus 153C now clubbed together in section 148. In all these cases, if they go for 148, if they issue you 148A, you write 148A is not applicable. Why? Because you have some information in your possession in case of search, in case of some other party after 1st of April 21, that information pertains to me, where there is a deemed information which suggests income as escape assessment. Therefore, you show me a satisfaction note and you show me you have taken prior approval before recording the satisfaction note. If you simply reopen, in case where a search has happened after 1st of April 21, relying upon the information received from the inside portal or investigation wing, by following 148A procedures, I will argue, no, information relates to me, show me prior satisfaction. and show me prior approval. If it's not in place and you've not followed the procedures, it is bad in law. Mostly the cases will be this kind of cases. किसी के यहाँ पे कुछ हुआ उसको मेरा मिला, search and survey. Mostly search, not survey, search. So if there is a search, please take this argument. In case of search, I am a third party. You have information against me. Firstly, you cannot go under 148A. Because there is deemed suggestion, we'll go to 148A also. Two, to reopen my case, there has to be a satisfaction recorded with the prior approval of the principal commissioner. If these two conditions are not fulfilled, it is without jurisdiction, the reopening notices have to be quashed. Plus, एक तो satisfaction record करो with the prior approval of the commissioner, along with 148 notice. Before issuing 148 notice, also they have to take second approval. There have to be supposed to be two approvals. So satisfaction ka approval, and before issuing 148, one more approval is specified in the first proviso. There are supposed to be two approvals. Suppose he says only one approval, you please challenge it. Under 153C, AO of the search party to record a satisfaction that his assets belong to B, and AO of B to record a satisfaction that these assets have a bearing on determination of total income. There were two satisfactions. AO of search party and AO of the assessor. वो दो satisfaction निकल गया. Only one satisfaction. And more importantly, they are not even required to form a satisfaction that this has a bearing on determination of total income. Please see. What is deemed to suggest income as escaped assessment? Mere assets or documents belonging to A is deemed to suggest income as escaped assessment. But whether there is any income escaping assessment, वो नहीं लिखा है. So for example, some on money paid to a builder. Builder ने उसको नहीं दिखाया, but मैंने दिखा दिया उसको. मेरे source में दिखा दिया मैंने उसको. I am able to demonstrate the source. And there is no income escaping assessment in my case. A builder के यहाँ पे search हुआ, and they say your case falls under third party. We have recorded satisfaction. Mere recording satisfaction that these assets belong to you or information in the documents relate to you is sufficient for them to issue notice under 140. Therefore, my argument that 147 income escaping assessment becomes relevant. You still have to form an opinion that income is escaped assessment. You cannot simply, just because uske paas document mila, wo mera hai, tu mera khol lo. Not possible. There has to be an income escaping assessment. You are deeming that there is a suggestion, but whether I have disclosed or not, whether it has a relevance on determination of total. For example, jewelry found during the course of search in case of A party says ये jewelry मेरा नहीं, मेरी बेटी का है, she stays at some other place. So AO of B will reopen her assessment after recording satisfaction. They reopen the assessment of earlier year. Under section 69A, an undisclosed asset is to be taxed in the year in which it is found. That is the year of search. But उसने उसके पहले वाला साल खोला. So my argument is where is the income which is escaped assessment for the earlier year? 2. Suppose that asset is disclosed by her in a return of income. Just because the asset belongs to her, can you reopen? The answer is no. Then you are making fishing rowing inquiries, not even applied your mind. Therefore, the procedure of 147 becomes important. (148A). For the first time, I have seen a show cause notice will be issued to you. You have to show cause why a notice will not be issued to you. Show cause notice to show cause why a notice will not be issued to you under 148 of the Income Tax Act. But a good provision brought in to take care of many problems. Everything starts with an information in the possession of AO which suggests income as escaped assessment. Subsequent to that, AO may conduct any inquiry if required, but with the prior approval of specified authority. Then he has to issue a show cause notice to the SSC. with the prior approval has been removed now. Show cause notice issue करने के लिए approval नहीं चाहिए. If you see beyond 3 years, specified authority is the principal chief commissioner of income tax. There is one principal chief commissioner of income tax for the city of Mumbai. अगर हर एक रीअसेसमेंट का केस में उसके पास अप्रूवल लेने गए तो उसके पास तो और कोई काम बचेगा ही नहीं. Because if I have heard correctly, about 1.5 lakh, 2 lakh notices are in process. Does that mean he has to apply his mind? One person, principal chief commissioner of income tax, has to apply his mind for conducting inquiry, for passing of order, for issuing notice. So it's a separate issue altogether. Show cause notice will be issued. You will be provided the material, the information. You to reply why a notice under 148 should not be issued. In your reply, you can say there is no information which suggests income has escaped assessment. Please provide details which are in your possession. In all probability, they are simply having information on the inside portal or information from the investigation. इसके अलावा उनके पास एक पेपर नहीं है. So if there is a search in case of party and that party has admitted कि ये बोगस है, उस पार्टी का स्टेटमेंट भी नहीं है आपके ऑफिसर के पास, और फेसलेस के पास तो ये भी नहीं रहता. The faceless officer will not have a single document. They are simply going ahead based on the information received. As good as I am writing a letter to Himanshu. This is information which I have received. You please reopen. उसको मेरे को पूछना चाहिए. What is the material evidence? Statement किधर है? क्या incriminating documents? He will not write. He will simply reopen. I have a right under 148A clause B to ask what is the material in your possession. Please give me. I want to make a proper reply. Very recently, Tata Financial Capital Services Bombay High Court judgment in the context of old section, of course, but will apply with equal force in new section. Whenever you provide reasons recorded, you have to provide all the information and material in your possession along with the reasons recorded. You have to provide copy of approval sanction form. You have to give personal hearing to the SSC to make objections. You have to pass a reasoned order disposing the objections. Clearly, under 148A, simply stating हमको ये information मिला है, इतना income escaping assessment है, you file a reply is not a valid notice. Please ask for all the documentary evidences which they have. In all probability, उनके पास कुछ नहीं रहेगा. They are simply proceeding on the basis of information available on the inside portal. Once you file your reply, they'll have to pass an order disposing the objection. Along with the passing the order under 148A(d), they will issue notice under section 148. If they are convinced this is a fit case to issue notice under section 148. However, this whole procedure is not required to be followed in 4 situations. Search in your case after 1st April 21, or you are a third party and the assets or any material, jewelry, bullion has been found which belongs to you, satisfaction has been recorded, or you are a third party and some books of accounts documents which either pertain to you or relate to you, and a satisfaction has been recorded. 3 situations. If I compare this with explanation 2 of section 148, deemed suggestion, 4 cases, search, and 2 cases of third party, एक तो assets belonging to or information relating to, and the 4th situation was survey. Survey में deemed suggestion, but here under proviso to 148, survey is not covered in the exclusion. Therefore, in case of survey also, they have to issue you a notice under 148A. They have to follow that entire procedure. But what is excluded PCD? They are proposed to exclude cases where assessing officer has received information under scheme notified under section 135A pertaining to income chargeable to tax escaping assessment for any assessment year. So if they receive information under 135A, they'll simply say, I will not issue 148A notice. वो information में क्या है, वो मेरे को पूछ के किया है कि किसी और को पूछ के लिया है. At least you should give me an opportunity to rebut that. What follows from this is they pass the order under 148AD. I challenge it either in a writ petition or whatever it is. But in these cases, they are not required to follow 148AD. तो इस केस में मेरे को क्या करना है? How will I challenge that? Can I really challenge it? Can I ask for reasons recorded? That becomes a question. We'll discuss that later on. 148A is mandatory. Prior approval of specified authority before each step. Verification करना है, prior approval. Order pass करना है, prior approval. Assessee has to be provided with the information in possession of AO. Suppose उसने आपको information दे दिया, then they issue 148. And if you are aware कि यार मैं फंसने वाला हूँ, so in response to 148 notice, you will file a return of income offering it to tax. Does that save you from penalty? Answer is no. 270A, subsection 2, which deals with underreporting income. Difference between your reassessed income and either your return of income or income assessed earlier is deemed to be underreporting. और आपको उसके ऊपर penalty भरना पड़ेगा unless you justify under 270A6, etc. Opportunity of being heard. The words used are assessee shall be given an opportunity of being heard, which means not just written submission. You can ask for personal hearing. You can rely upon Tata Capital. I'll give that citation. You have to dispose by passing an order why fit case to issue notice under section 148. You can take all sorts of objections. You can ask for approval at each stage. You can ask कि तुमको क्या information मिला है, कौन से source से मिला है, कौन से clause में बैठ रहा है, whether there is any income escaping assessment, have you applied your mind, everything you should take in your objections under 148A(b). And really speaking, now if I look back at 148AD, what is the purpose of 148AD? What is the purpose of giving prior opportunity? Why this entire procedure? क्योंकि अगर उनके पास information आ गया तो reopen कर दो ना, खत्म कर दो उधर ही बात. Why give prior opportunity to the assessee to respond? This shows that they cannot simply rely upon information. After receiving information, you make proper inquiries, scrutiny, whatever verification you want to do, you do. You ask me what is this? I will reply. Then you have to pass a proper order saying why income has escaped assessment under 147. It is only then that you can reopen under 148. Otherwise, there is no purpose of 148. It's not an empty formality. The whole process is ultimately he has to come to a conclusion that income has escaped assessment. Information suggesting income has escaped assessment is a starting point. Thereafter, inquiry. Ask me for details. I will reply. After considering everything, now you form a belief that yes, income has escaped assessment, therefore 148. अब इसका second side is this that अगर ये सब अभी हो गया तो 148 के बाद वो क्या करेगा? Because even if he considers the entire issue on merits at the stage of reopening, what remains for assessment? This is the second side of this argument. 148A orders are not appealable. In fact, GK and Driveshaft has been given a tacit acceptance कि हाँ ये procedure follow करो. You can file a writ. You can also file an appeal relying upon this one Supreme Court judgment 419 ITR 440 Genpact. This was in context of, if I am not wrong, I think buyback or dividend distribution tax and order was passed, and they say there is no appeal mechanism. Therefore, I filed a writ. Supreme Court says no. Under 246A, where you deny your liability to assess under the Act, you can file an appeal. Even if there is no specific section in 246A, you can still file an appeal. Therefore, one can, according to me, file an appeal rely against the order under 148AD because you deny your liability to tax. But then the problem is that when you file an appeal to CIT appeal, he will not stay the proceedings. He has no power to stay. तो ये भी चलता रहेगा और assessment भी चलता रहेगा. The better option is to file a writ. You cannot do 264 because उसका ही approval लेके उसने order pass किया. If he is himself granted approval, we cannot go to him. What arguments you can take? Whether any income has escaped assessment, This is the information to suggest income has escaped assessment. A requisite approval of the prescribed authority has been taken. Condition of 149 has been fulfilled. Service of notice is proper. All the procedural aspects you can challenge before the assessing officer. Which means 148A clause D order has now replaced your reasons to believe. This now becomes the fulcrum of your challenge. इसको challenge करना है, इसके अलावा वो आगे नहीं बढ़ सकता. Will it be done in a faceless manner? They have made a section to do this in a faceless manner. लेके आएंगे आगे फ्यूचर में faceless scheme even for this purpose. Exceptions. We have already discussed the exceptions are cases where search has taken place after 1421 or where search has taken place after 1421 and the assets belong to a third party or information related to a third party. In these two cases, no requirement of issuing show cause under 148 and passing of order. They can directly issue 148 notice. One more exception which is sought to be added by the Finance Bill 22, which we have discussed, is where he receives any information under scheme notified under section 135A. This again is an exception where they say we will not issue you a 148A notice. I don't know why they want to do this, because under 135A scheme, which I read today morning, they can collect information from various sources, not only from the SSC but from various sources. तो अगर तुम किसी बाहर वाले से information collect कर रहे हो, it becomes imperative that you put it to me for my comments before reopening the assessments. Why there is, अगर सर्वे को तुम 148A में लेके आ रहे हो, then why not include cases where information has been received under section 135? Now please mark the difference. Explanation 1 to section 148. Any information received by the AO under section 135A, इतना ही लिखा है. Which suggests income escaping assessment नहीं लिखा है. But now you read the wordings of 148A explanation. This red part. Assessing officer has received any information under the scheme notified under section 135A. This is the same wordings in 148. आगे लिखा है pertaining to income chargeable to tax escaping assessment for any assessment year in case of the assessment. Only information received, not showing any income escaping assessment, you have to follow 148A. But if information received which shows or which pertain to income chargeable to tax escaping assessment, then you are not required to follow 148A. There has to be some meaning given to the word pertaining to income chargeable to tax escaping assessment. This is my limited understanding of these wordings. Now, the moot question is, ये सब केस में 148A follow मत करो, search में, third party में या 135A में. But if I want to challenge 148 notice, how do I challenge that? पहले वो 148 notice, I file return, I ask for reasons, I file objections, I get an order disposing of objections. Now the provisions are पहले show cause, I reply, they pass an order, and then 148 is issued. But what in case where 148A procedures are not supposed to be followed? There, if I want to challenge 148 notice, how do I do? So my understanding is today also in 153C cases, people are asking for satisfaction note. They are objecting. AO is passing order disposing objections, and then they are challenging 153C proceedings in a writ petition. Similar analogy can be applied here. If they directly issue 148, please file an objection. Because why have you not followed 148A procedures? And if you have not followed because it falls in the exception, then please provide me relevant details. Whether you have fulfilled all the conditions, please provide me approvals of the specified authority. He has to reply to your questions. Once you get the reply, certainly you can challenge. Survey proceedings under section 148. Survey proceedings रहेगा तो भी 148A का procedure follow करना पड़ेगा. New section brought in section 148B. If there is a search or survey and an order is made in persons of search or survey, assessment order can be passed only with the prior approval of joint commissioner or additional commissioner. This has been brought in very recently. Now this is where the entire game will begin. Time limit to issue notice under 148. May I just stretch by 15 minutes? Yeah, thank you. Jaman hoyi ache. And starting with 45 minutes went into the institutes. So time limit for issuing notice under section 148. If 3 years, within 3 years from the end of the relevant assessment year, they can reopen subject to fulfillment of condition of 147, 148, 148A. Of course, subject to the exceptions of those sections. But if more than 3 years have elapsed, there are certain additional conditions imposed to reopen. AO has in his possession books of accounts, documents, or evidence which reveal that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment of more than 50 lakh rupees. Such income is represented in the form of asset. Up tak sirf asset tha. Now they are proposing to introduce 2 more items. Or expenditure in respect of a transaction or in relation to an event or occasion, or any entry or entries in the books of account. So we personally feel finance ministry ने 6 साल से 3 साल तक restrict कर दिया. What a great step. But then we realize it is actually extended from 6 to 10 years. Because 50 lakhs is peanuts. Now let us look at the conditions if they want to reopen beyond 3 years. AO has in his possession, उसके हाथ में होना चाहिए. What? Books of accounts, documents, or evidence. As we already discussed, they merely reopen because there is an information on the inside portal, accommodation entry taken. Will not be sufficient if after 3 years. There has to be some books of accounts. Books of accounts, everybody understands the meaning. Or documents, or evidence. Information on inside portal or information from investigation wing is neither books of account, nor document, nor evidence. Please ask in your objection if it is beyond 3 years, was what is the books of accounts, documents, or information in your possession? If he says information from investigation wing, case closes. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Such documents actually उन्होंने क्या किया 10 साल कर दिया है ताकि सपोज 5वें साल में आपने ऑब्जेक्शन लिया तो 6ठे साल में वापस रीओपन कर दिया by getting the books of accounts. Therefore, they have extended their ambit to 10 years. 2. Such documents should reveal. The word used is reveal. What do you mean by the word reveal? It should show that income has escaped assessment. Reasons to believe नहीं चाहिए. So conclusively दिखाना पड़ेगा income has escaped assessment. It should reveal on verification of books, documents, evidence. One should come to a conclusion income has escaped assessment. Such income escaping assessment is more than rupees 50 lakhs. Now there are 3 items. Such income is represented in the form of asset, expenditure in respect of transaction or in relation to an event or occasion. अगर ये 2 में कवर नहीं हो रहा है तो तीसरे में तो 100% कवर हो जाएगा any entry or entries in the books of account. But it should be read in some context. Firstly, assets they have defined shall include immovable property, land or building, shares, security, loans, and advance deposits in bank account. Suppose there is a cash deposit or some credits in your bank account of more than 50 lakhs. Can they reopen? No. It should reveal that income has escaped assessment. How does mere deposit or mere credit in the bank account reveal income has escaped assessment? Unsecured loan share application money received. Frankly, I don't understand if there is any income, there has to be a corresponding asset. Therefore, asset के definition में तो बैठना ही चाहिए. For example, मेरे को unsecured loan मिला, तो सामने मेरा बैंक बढ़ गया, bank balance. So there is an asset. But that is not the interpretation which one should give to the word asset. So it's a liability. The receipt of amount leads to creation of liability, not an asset. So therefore, asset कब बनता है? When income account is credited and the asset account is debited. Here what is happening? Asset is debited, liability is credited. There is no income. Okay. So unsecured loan share application money will not come under the word asset. They have now introduced subsection 1A. They are not going to introduce. Please look at the wordings of subsection 1A. Notwithstanding anything contained in subsection 1, where the income chargeable to tax represented the form of an asset or expenditure in relation to an event or occasion has escaped assessment, and the investment in such asset. Does this mean that you can reopen under 149 1B only if there is an investment in asset? Are they trying to say only if there is an investment in an asset you can reopen? Investment connotes a different meaning. I have parked my money to get the asset. Whereas, for example, I received some on money, and on money is in the form of asset, cash, but there is no investment in the money. So though on money is an asset, it is not an investment in the asset. I am going to technical. यही करना पड़ता है कोर्ट में. You have to just play with the words. Because layman feels नहीं asset तो है ना, but then they introduce 149 1A. They say investment in the asset. So your intention under 149 1B is to tackle only investment in assets. Receipt of on money, I'll argue, is not an investment. I received money. It is an investment. This money I'll invest somewhere. That is an investment. Okay. The second item is income escaping assessment represented in the form of expenditure in respect of a transaction or relation to any event or occasion. Income escaping assessment represented in the form of expenditure, ये paradox है. अगर income है तो मेरा expenditure नहीं हो सकता है. Here they are trying to cover your bogus expenditures. So if I purchase goods, or if I show that I have purchased goods, but it's a bogus purchase, and they have information, certainly it will not fall in asset because यहाँ पे तो पैसा बाहर गया. So therefore, they will now try to cover you under 2. This is an expenditure, income represented in the form of expenditure. Otherwise, I don't have a form of connection between income escaping assessment represented in the form of expenditure. Or it can be an expenditure which is not disclosed in your books of accounts, section 69E. C or E, I don't know. For example, can they reopen on the ground that you have claimed this expenditure, this is a personal expenditure not allowable? Can one say income represented in the form of expenditure as escape assessment? Yes. आपका income escaping assessment. I'm just trying to, because this is very new, I'm just trying to make examples of how the cases will fit. Lastly, entry in the books of accounts. If there's a cash loan, there's no entry in the books of accounts. Not covered by any entry in the books of accounts. It's not an asset because loan is repayable. No expenditure in the form of transaction. If you receive a cash loan of more than 1 crore, they cannot reopen under 149 1B. Neither an asset, nor entry in the books of accounts, or expenditure in respect of any transaction. So what will entry in the books of account cover? According to me, entry in the books of account we should cover only accommodation entries. बाकी तो हर एक चीज का बुक में एंट्री होता है. So you can somehow fit everything in the entry in the books of accounts. That should not be the interpretation. Now they have inserted this subsection 1A which we just read. What is this subsection says? अगर आपका खर्चा हुआ है या आपका इन्वेस्टमेंट हुआ है which is more than 50 lakhs, but you have planned such that वो 50 लाख 2 साल में split हो गया, so it doesn't cross the threshold of 50 lakhs for 149 1B. If this is the case, you will reopen both the years irrespective of 50 lakh threshold. Okay, the promise which the Honorable Finance Minister gave that we will reopen only if it crosses 50 lakhs, they have revoked that promise. 50 lakh का threshold रखा है तो रखा है ना. Now if you are splitting it, then why are you tackling both the years? Only tackle years where it is more than 50 lakhs. $149 का एक अभी, now this also is very critical, which is a time limit. Say for example 31st March 22 is the last day to issue notice. उसके पहले उसको 148A का प्रोसीजर करना है. 148A का नोटिस इशू करना है, मेरा रिप्लाई लेना है, उसको फाइनल करके then he has to issue 148 notice. Now if he gives me 10 days time to file a reply in response to his show cause notice, third proviso to section 148 says that his time limit to issue notice under 148 is extended by 10 days. Okay, so I've just given an example. AY 1819 3 years ends on 31st March 22. Notice under section 148A(b) on 15th March, allowing 10 days time to the assessee to file a reply. He has to pass an order under 148A(d) within 30 days from the end of the month in which reply is filed, that is 30th April 22. But he has to issue notice if he wants to issue within 3 years by 1st of April. So उसको order भी pass करना है और notice भी issue करना है. Therefore, they have excluded this time period of 10 days. Now, if he issues notice under 148 up to 10th of April or 11th of April, it's a valid notice. For today, if I argue 31st March is the last day, now you will have to compute in each and every case कि इसने मेरे को कितना time दिया reply file करने. That period has to be added, and within that period he has to issue notice under 148. This will not apply in a search case where 148A is not applicable. There the last day is 31st of March. So this is an exclusion period. यहाँ पे भी काफी time mistake हो सकता है. The AO might think I have given 10 days, 12 days. Third proviso uses the word time allowed or extended time allowed. That means you seek an adjournment and he gives you extended time. Suppose उसने 10 दिन का time दिया, you seek adjournment 5 दिन का. उसने कुछ नहीं लिखा. He is not granted any extended time. We see in many faceless cases, you seek an adjournment, लोग सामने कुछ response नहीं देते. And after 10 days, you take further 5 days to file a reply. Now AO is under the impression मैंने इसको 15 दिन दिया. But I will argue, no, you allowed me only 10 days. I filed an adjournment, but you are not granted me adjournment. Where is your communication saying I am granting you 5 days more? So he will issue notice on 15th of April because he is under the impression 15 days given. I will argue only 10 days given. Where is the extended time allowed? I have filed my reply after 5 days. You ignore that. Notice is time barred. So अभी ये नया controversy, नया litigation will arise in this area. The biggest misconception which everybody has is now they can reopen up to 10 years. Say AY 11, 12, 12, 13, 13, 14, 14, 15, which have become time barred under the old law. 6 years have expired. Can now be reopened under 148 new provision because now the time limit is 10 years. The answer is no. Time limit for all assessment years up to AY 21-22 for reopening is still 6 years. This is how it is still 6 years. First proviso to section 149(1). Provided that no notice under section 148 shall be issued at any time in case for a relevant assessment year beginning on or before 1st April 2020. So all assessment years 21-22 and prior assessment years. No notice can be issued if a notice under section 148, आगे का पार्ट भूल जाओ, could not have been issued at that time on account of being beyond the time limit specified under provisions of clause B of subsection 1 of this section as they stood immediately before the commencement of Finance Act 21. 31st March 24 को if he wants to issue a notice for assessment year 14-15, check करने के लिए what I will do, 31st March 24 को if the old reassessment provisions continue, could he have issued a notice 14-15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, extended to 22 because of that TOLA. 31st March 22 was the last date when he could have issued notice under old section 149(1)(b). If he could not have issued under old section 149(1)(b), he cannot reopen under new section relying on 10 years provision. This is how the position will look. All assessment years up to AY 14-15 are now time barred. They cannot reopen. AY 15-16, they can reopen only up to 31st March 22. Similarly, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. AY 21-22 can be last reopened up to 31st March 28 under the new section. If they want to reopen within 3 years, then what is the time limit? If they want to issue after 3 years, before 10 years, what is the time limit? This is only for the purpose of computation of time limits. They have to certainly fulfill conditions of section 148, 148A, 149, 1B. Income represented in the form of asset or expense as escaped assessment. And a very small ticklish point. They have also amended to say कि पहले वालों ने क्या रखा था, जूना 148 में ओपन नहीं कर सकते तो नए में नहीं कर सकते. अब वो बोल रहे जूना 153A 153C में नहीं कर सकते तो नए में भी नहीं कर सकते. For assessment years prior to 21-22. Very simple example. Under 153A, you could have reopened for 6 years. If you want to go from 6 to 10 years, fourth proviso to section 153A says that AO has in his possession books of accounts, documents, evidence which reveal that income represented in the form of asset has escaped assessment of more than 50 lakhs. Under old 153A, 6 से 10 साल में if you want to reopen, income represented in the form of asset must have escaped assessment. But if you look at 149(1)(b), they were amended. Income in the form of asset, expenditure, book entry. So, if they want to reopen for assessment year 21-22 or prior years, and under the old 153A, this is beyond 6 years, then not only there has to be an income escaping assessment, but it should be only in the form of assets. They cannot say expense and they cannot say book entry. Because under old 153A, you could not have reopened. You could have reopened only if there is an asset. Therefore, under new 149 also, you could not have reopened. You can reopen only if there is an asset. Even if section 149(1)(b) says escapement in the form of liability, expenses or book entry. So this controversy of notice is issued after 31st March or up to 30th June, whether under old law or new law. Many people must have received notices after 1st of April up to 30th of June under the old law. And this controversy is going on. There are 5 high courts in favor of the SSC. Bombay High Court has been heard and the order is reserved and the matter has traveled to Supreme Court. Certainly has to be under the new law, not under the old law. Because by Finance Act 2021, you have replaced the whole section. They are issuing notice under the old law, relying upon the notification issued. कि हमारे पास टाइम है, तुम्हारे पास टाइम है, nobody doubts, but then you have to follow the new law, not the old law. This controversy is now very well settled. 150 remains as it is. Order in consequence, reopening in consequence to any order direction. Only one point. Even in this case, 148A has to be followed. You have to follow 148 to issue notice, have to reply, you have to pass the order. Sanction, this is the last section. If more than, please read the wording, sir. It's very, very confusing. Specified authority for the purpose of section 148 and 148A shall be principal commissioner or principal director or commissioner or director. If 3 years or less than 3 years have elapsed, and principal chief commissioner, principal director general, or where there is no principal chief commissioner, principal director general, then chief commissioner or director general. Where there is no principal chief commissioner, अगर है तो उसको ही करना पड़ेगा. If more than 3 years have elapsed from the end of the relevant year, I have a small doubt. Clause 1, if 3 years have elapsed, principal commissioner, principal director, if 3 years or less than 3 years have elapsed. So less than 3 years में तो चलो उसको करना है. But if 3 years have elapsed, तो भी principal commissioner को ही करना है. But see clause 2. If more than 3 years have elapsed. So my doubt is this. 3 years have elapsed. AY 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. 3 साल हो गए. You are in 22. But not more than, sorry, 3 years have elapsed. He wants to issue at the end of 3.5 years. तो किसका अप्रूवल चाहिए? A says if 3 years have elapsed, principal commissioner. B says if more than 3 years have elapsed, then principal chief commissioner. This falls in both. 3 years have also elapsed and more than 3 years have also elapsed. किसका अप्रूवल चाहिए? So according to me, 3 साल के अंदर principal commissioner, 3 साल के बाहर principal chief commissioner. Somebody has to settle this controversy. In Bombay, all notices issued after 1421 beyond 3 years, 149 1B में, all cases prior approval of principal chief commissioner. एक ही बंदा है principal chief commissioner बॉम्बे, top post in Bombay, उसका अप्रूवल चाहिए. नहीं है, case closed. I have given procedure for assessments, non-search case and survey cases. What will happen very quickly? AO will come into possession of information which suggests income as escaping assessment. AO will conduct an inquiry under 148A with a prior approval. Steps taken, approval required, and time period. These are the 3 columns. Then AO will issue show cause notice along with the information he will provide. Time limits prescribed under 149. Assessee to file a reply. 7 to 30 days or extended time allowed. AO to pass order under 148 AD. It's not 148 D, it is 148 AD. 1 month from the end of the month in which reply is received or time allowed expires. This is a time limit given in 148 AD. Notice under section 148 and order under section 148 AD to be served on the assessee within time limits under 149, along with the extension given in proviso. As I said, unko extension milta hai to the extent of time allowed to you, 10 days or 15 days, whatever it is. Against that order, you can file a writ. If not filing the writ, you cooperate in the assessment, you file a return of income. He will issue 143.2, 142.1, 143.2 का भी time limit prescribed है. Complete the reassessment proceedings by following the principles of natural justice 12 months from the end of the financial year in which notice under section 148 is served, and you can challenge it in an appeal before the CIT appeals within 30 days. Procedure to apply 3 years, 10 years का अलग procedure है, 149 1B and approval सबका अलग अलग है. For beyond 3 years, 149 1B has to be complied with. This procedure will also cover survey cases. Survey is forming part of this. Only survey exception is that deemed information. बाकी कुछ exception नहीं है. Search cases में क्या होगा? Search under section 142. Directly notice under section 148. No prior 148 A, D, A, B, C, D. File return of income. At this stage, I can seek information from him. What is the income escaping assessment? Please give copy of all approvals. He has to provide me. I can file objections. He has to pass order disposing of objections. I can challenge it in a writ petition. Even otherwise, I can directly challenge 148 notice in a writ petition saying there is no income which has escaped assessment. If not filing it, then the normal assessment procedures and completion of assessment challenging before CITP. Such cases, what are the differential points? There's a deemed information which suggests income escaping assessment. There is no 148A procedures, but if it is beyond 3 years, he has to still follow 149(1)(b). Income escaping assessment more than 50 lakhs, represented in the form of assets or entries or expenses. Of course, prior approvals have to be taken. Search cases in case of third parties. इसका अलग प्रोसेस है पूरा. पहले किसी के यहाँ पे सर्च होगा. Then my AO will record a satisfaction note that assets, money, bullion, jewelry, books of account documents belong to me, or any information contained in the books of accounts documents pertain to me, relate to me. This with the prior approval of principal commissioner or commissioner. Then he will issue notice under section 148 again with the approval of specified authority. Mind you, beyond 3 years, third party search cases, satisfaction with the approval of principal commissioner, but notice under 148 with the approval of principal chief commissioner. Satisfaction with the approval of principal commissioner or commissioner, but beyond 3 years, specified authority is principal chief commissioner. So those approval. They have complicated things for themselves. I'll file a return. I'll seek reasons and satisfaction note for reopening the assessment. I'll file my objections. They have to pass an order disposing objections. I can file a writ or continue in the normal procedures. बार बार ये रिट का जिक्र क्यों कर रहा हूं? Of course, I am an advocate. 2, there is a fear. उसने खोला ना तो ये 4-5 चीज और ऐड कर देगा. 2, अगर ऐड हो गया ना तो 20% का डिमांड पे करना पड़ेगा. To stop that process, people go in writ. That is the whole logic of going in writ, because ultimately, if your demand is not set, see, AO and commissioner is not going to stop your demand beyond 20%. If blindly they'll say pay 20, balance stayed. 5 crore का डिमांड आ गया, आप कहां से 20% पे करोगे? There again you have to go to High Court to get a stay. Otherwise, they'll attach your bank accounts. So ultimately, somehow, if you are willing to pay 20% and go in appeal, okay. But if you are fearing, यार कुछ और ना खोल दे, in that situation, one may contemplate. Why I am presuming that I have to file objections and order disposing of objections? Because of GK and dry shaft. You have to fulfill a jurisdictional requirement under 147. Escapement of income. You have to fulfill a jurisdictional requirement of 149(1)(b), 50 lakh rupees or more. You have to fulfill a jurisdictional requirement of approval of specified authority. If the jurisdictional requirements are not satisfied, I can certainly challenge it in a writ petition. Finally, some of the old jurisdictional requirements which are no longer applicable, reasons to believe nikal gaya. More than 4 years failure on the part of the assessee nikal gaya. And foreign assets reopening up to 16 years nikal gaya. What are the old requirements which still continue in the new regime? Change of opinion because of Calvinator. There should be an income escaping assessment. Your jurisdictional AO should issue notice, not any other person. He cannot reopen for verification purpose or for making fishing rowing inquiries. There should be a recording of reasons in the form of order under section 148A clause D. All issues related to service of notice are there. Approval of specified authority and application of mind is there. And the procedure of assessment has to be followed. Some new requirements under the new regime. Information with the AO which suggests income as escaped assessment. Prior approval of authorities at various stages. वो सब आपको चेक करना पड़ेगा, ये स्टेज पे क्या है, वो स्टेज पे क्या है. There should be information either with the risk management strategy, audit objection, information received under an agreement or under a scheme notified under 135A, etc., etc. Opportunity of being heard under section 148A is a jurisdictional requirement. In case of third party, in case of search, there should be a satisfaction and prior approval on that satisfaction. I really doubt whether one can take cross-examination at the stage of 148 AD, but for the sake of argument, I will include it. Ask it, there is no harm in asking. He will say, I will give you in the assessment proceeding. And the additional condition of beyond 3 years up to 10 years, if 50 lakh in the form of asset expenditure books of. And before departing, please consider these aspects when you are in a reassessment proceeding. If it's an undisclosed income under section 68, 69, 69A, etc., tax rate is 60% under 115 BBE. No set off of loss, no depreciation, nothing. Penalty alag se. If you are found engaged in entering into a cash transaction, cash purchase, cash loan 269 SST, उसका अलग 100% penalty है 271G में, 271D and E, I'm sorry. And there is also a penalty under 271 AAD if there is a bogus entry or bogus accommodation entry in the books of account. So when I was analyzing it, सब जगह से scrutinize किया है लोगों ने. Earlier used to escape saying cash flow है कैसे करेंगे, या फिर used to escape books of account में entry, this, that, depreciation. But tax rates are high, undisclosed income is getting taxed, not getting any sort of depreciation. Cash transactions में penalty लगता है 269 SST में, books of account में false entry का 271 AAD में penalty लगता है. So they are trying to cover you from all angles. This is becoming like a Western culture to give you a correct income. We have our own source to find out information. अगर हमने एक बार ढूंढा ना, then we'll screw you from all angles. In all these cases, most important point which arises in which will assist an assessee is, please don't forget to take cross examination. इधर भी statement वगैरह आया है, without fail your first argument, please provide me cross examination, please provide me with all the materials. Supreme Court judgment in case of Andaman Timber, Bombay High Court judgment in case of HR Mehta. If cross examination is not provided, assessment is void ab initio. वो लोग वापस नहीं बेचते, वो quash करते. So this is a very valid argument which one has. Just let me remind you, the taxpayers charter. Should keep this in mind at every point of time. Lastly, I just quote the judgment of Supreme Court in case of Gotla. Though equity and taxation are often strangers, attempts should be made that these do not remain always so. And if a construction results in equity rather than in injustice, such construction should be preferred to the literal construction. Thank you so much for a patient hearing. And I don't expect any questions because it is lunch time. But if at all there is any, I'll be happy to assist. Thank you so much.